I hated that town. Sprawled across the rotting foothills of a dead mountain chain, the city was a mass of old South racism and corruption, filled with inhabitants too poor or too sentimental to leave for someplace better. The city sweltered in the midsummer heat, smog from traffic, mixing with lethal amounts of pollen and dust to form a soup that killed asthmatics as effectively as a whiff of mustard gas. I'd acquired a sum of money from a job a few months back, and my needs were modest, so I had nothing better to do than hang out at the fountain downtown or at the coffee shop nearby. I met Charlie first when I noticed some truly phenomenal photographs on his laptop. They were all beautiful, decayed structures, some of which I'd seen around town. Charlie never made eye contact, as he explained in his mild, halting speech that he didn't take the photos. Those were Jack's, but he handled setting up Jack's website a few evenings later. I was sitting on the floor of Jack's tiny apartment, drinking beer and talking with a small group of kids that were most excited by abandoned and condemned buildings, fire hazards, and other signs of urban decay. They called themselves urbexers or urban explorers. The leader of the group, Jack, was passionate about his photography and was working his art into his college thesis. Jack was tall with a surfer's build that could have landed him a contract to model for Abercrombie and Fitch if it weren't for his shock of unruly blonde hair. Jack's girlfriend, Annie, at first glance seemed to perform no function aside from looking very good and hanging on to Jack. I asked Charlie about her once, and he said that Annie was a very good listener, which is what Jack seemed to want. Shane was huge. He topped 400 pounds, standing well over 6 feet tall, with thick slabs of muscle overlaid by thicker slabs of fat. He was from some no-name community in the forested hills of middle Alabama, and he dressed as if he was prepping for a deer hunt. For all his size and massive presence, he was calm and very quiet. Perhaps in response to Jack's constant diatribe about the architectural methodologies of whatever, the last member of the group was Petia. She was a transplant from some formerly Soviet bloc country, uprooted from all that she knew and rudely shoved into the semi-rural Alabama soil, watered a bit and told to deal with it. Lucky for her, Petia was tough as a weed and thrived. She was short and hard, looking more like a 13-year-old boy than a 19-year-old woman. She discovered country music early after her move and took to it with a passion that verged on neurotic, to a point that her speech was a heavy southern drawl punctuated with weird Slavic inflections. Jack's obsession was photography, specifically taking pictures of decaying urban structures. If given a chance, he would talk at great and exhausting length about the moral imperative of photographing ruins, as we owe the original laborers and craftsmen some of our attention to the artistry of their hard work. Jack met Charlie in high school. Over the next few years, the pair developed their infiltration skills and expanded their group to encompass others with similar interests. Jack seemed to be the ideal man, and had an uncanny talent for finding unexplored sites all over the area. Once Jack had located a site, Charlie would come up with a way to get in. Not only was Charlie an expert locksmith, he had made friends with many of the librarians and city record keepers in the area, so he was often able to provide historical maps and records for the sites. We bounced along a poorly maintained RD in Shane's van, listening to Jack crow about our target for the night. Shane did not appear to be a very smart person, given his size and usual closed-mouthness. However, it was his idea to buy a white panel van and affixed official-looking State Department of Infrastructure decals to it. He had mounted yellow bubble lights to the top and black and yellow caution tape around the bottom. When we stopped, he pulled a few orange traffic cones off of a metal mount on the front of the van, placed them in front and behind the van. "Isn't that kind of conspicuous?" I asked. Shane smiled. "Yep, ain't no damn hooligan kids want to be conspicuous, so the van must be here on official business." "Here it is, man." Jack clapped me on the back. "Holy of holies. The Waterworks Tunnel. Half a mile straight through a mountain, and Charlie can get us in." I turned and looked at the small metal door set into the side of a hill. It doesn't look like much, and I didn't think it was that hard to get into. "It's not," Charlie said, "but we're going into the side tunnel." Charlie walked around to the near of the van and pulled out a pickaxe. I wouldn't have been more shocked if he'd pulled out a severed head. As a rule, Urbex greatly disapproves of any actions that change a site. They don't litter, they don't graffiti, and on some message boards there are long-running arguments about even using chalk to mark for finding their way. "What's the side tunnel?" I asked. You'll see soon enough, Petya said, handing me a head-mounted flashlight. I grabbed my backpack, which was heavy with gear, snacks, extra flashlights, and water bottles. Jack grabbed his shovel from the back of the van, and Shane another pickaxe. Moments later, the van was closed and locked, orange cones glowing in the dim light. Charlie produced an actual key to the lock on the metal door and hauled it open. He caught my look and said, "Helps to have friends at City Hall." One by one, we walked single file through the door, into the waterworks tunnel. Petya closed the metal door with a grunt, and the boom echoed through the darkness. The waterworks tunnel was much like every other tunnel, low, cramped, and moist, with an unpleasant smell. Dirt caked the exposed brickwork, and in some places iron piping lay exposed. Back like 100 years ago, when the Dunn brothers built this thing, there wasn't a good way to get water from the Cahaba River into town, Jack said. So they bored this tunnel right through the mountain, out the other side to where the river is. The side tunnel, though. Please be quiet, Charlie said. I'm trying to count. We had been steadily making our way down the tunnel. The darkness before and behind was absolute. I'd been in darker places, but the close confines were beginning to make me anxious. Jack moved away from Charlie back to me. Anyway, like about halfway through the mountain, the Dunn brothers got to a spot that they couldn't get through. They had to bring in heavier machinery, some kind of steam drill rig. You see how tight it is in here, man. They dug a tunnel off to the side, then they expanded it. They were under a deadline, like nearly about to lose their contract, so they made the miners work day and night. They actually set up a small camp in the side tunnel. There were sleeping areas with beds built right into the walls. They even had a small camp store. Well, eventually the miners got through the tough spot, and the Dunn brothers just walled up the side tunnel. Nobody's been in there since. Jack's words echoed sibilantly down the tunnel. Nobody until us, Shane laughed. It's bullshit, Petya said. There's no such thing as a side tunnel. It's Jack being full of shits again, like with that room under the fountain downtown. Hey, that was real, Annie said. He couldn't get the please be quiet guys, Charlie said, playing his flashlight around the floor inside the tunnel. Help me look for an iron valve or gear or something. We stopped talking and began looking around the tunnel. I followed the large iron pipe for a few feet and said, "Hey, is this it?" Charlie shined his light on the valve, then on a folded back photocopy of his map. "Yeah, that's it. Now, Shane, try that wall right there, right across from here. See if it's brick behind the dirt." The pickaxe was incredibly loud in the tunnel. "Good thing there's a mountain between us and anyone that might hear that," I said, holding my hands over my ears. Petya smirked and handed out ear covers from her backpack. Shane bashed the wall with a pickaxe a few more times, then scraped at it with the side of the axe. "Yep, that's concrete over brick right there," Shane said, pulling a crumbling red brick loose with his pick. Jack eagerly grabbed the sledgehammer. He and I took up positions on either side of Shane, and we began to hammer away at small spots on the wall several minutes later. Jack's sledge punched through the wall a few feet farther down the tunnel. "Hey, I'm through," Jack yelled. "Come on, help me." Shane and I moved near him, breaking the 100-year-old brickwork. Annie made a few feeble attempts at moving bricks out of the way until Petya shoved her aside. "You might break a nail." Petya growled and began stacking the rubble into two careful piles on either side of the widening hole in the wall. Charlie donned gloves and helped, and soon we stood before a small hole that appeared to open into another larger chamber. Charlie handed Jack the large spotlight. "After you, sir," Charlie said, bowing slightly and extending his arm towards the hole in the wall. Jack grinned and ducked into the hole, followed by Annie, Charlie, Shane, Petya, and finally me. From the other side, the bricked-over section was much larger than the small opening we'd made at nearly 6 yards across. There were a few wooden crates stacked on the sides of the tunnel, covered by dirt and dust-covered tarpaulins. The tunnel was narrow at first, but seemed to widen at some distance away. Its walls receded into the gloom out of the reach of the small, bright beam of light cast by Jack's spotlight. Jack moved the light around slowly, illuminating the side tunnel for the first time in over 100 years. "How big was this tunnel supposed to be?" I asked. "According to the map, Maybe 30 feet wide and 200 feet long, Charlie said. It's a hell of a lot bigger than that, Shane said, staring off into the darkness. I think it gets a lot wider down there. Okay, guys, let's get what we came for, Jack said. Annie, hand me my camera back. We need to document this as we go through it so we can have photos of the tunnel in its pristine state. As Jack set up his photography gear, we dispersed, each of us shining lights around the first part of the tunnel. I noted to myself that none of the group seemed particularly willing to go further down the tunnel. Jack began snapping photos, the flash flaring like lightning. Hey guys, look at this, Shane called from farther down the tunnel. The light from his flashlight made him seem small in the darkness, and his voice echoed strangely. Charlie, petty up. And I walked down the tunnel to where Shane stood. This isn't supposed to be here, Charlie whispered. I heard that line before. Hell, I've said it before. Suddenly, I was gripped with a panicky certainty that I should leave, drop my pack, ditch these fools, and run all the way to the doorway in the mountainside, open it, and keep running, maybe all the way to the ocean. I shuddered once, swallowed, and pushed it down. I had a job to do. Shane was standing in front of the first building of what seemed to be an abandoned town. I counted over 8 buildings on either side of a smooth dirt street extending down the tunnel. The buildings were crudely finished, with unpainted gray boards cracked and warped with age, but mostly whole. The cavern in which they stood was quite large, but the roof was low enough to see by flashlight. Jesus, Jack said, startling all of us. Quit that, asshole, Pettia growled, punching Jack in the arm. You scared the shit out of me standing here in a scary tunnel of Ghost Town. She got closer to him with a finger in his face. You're full of shit again, Jack. You set this up to pull a prank on the new guy. Yes, y'all knew this was down here. Jack backed up a step. Hey, back off. We had no idea this was down here. Are you serious? We had to break through a damn wall. How could we have known this place was even down here? The news articles I found did say they built a camp for the miners, Charlie said. The whole area was sealed up until we knocked a hole in the wall, and it seems pretty dry down here. So the buildings were basically mummified. Pettia rolled her eyes. Is exactly what we need, mummy bridges. She slugged Jack on the arm again and stomped off. Yeah, a camp, Charlie, Shane said. This ain't a camp. This is a whole town. There's, a dozen old buildings down here. I want to get out of here, Jack. Take me back to the van, Annie said, and leaned on Jack in such a way as to press many exciting parts against him. Pettia rolled her eyes. We're not going back now, Annie. We just got here. If Jack is right, we're first. We're never first at anything. That seemed to steel Jack's resolve. She's right, Annie. This is the type of thing that landed me a National Geographic deal. Charlie glanced at Jack. Jack, all of us. Of course, man, we'll be famous. Let's get a shot of that building there, Jack said with a distracted look that indicated he was no longer thinking about the current conversation. Annie and Shane cautiously investigated the shack on the opposite side of the tunnel. Pettia and I walked down the tunnel past the first few buildings to a larger clearing. The center of the clearing held a large stack of ancient, mostly burned wood in a circular fire pit. A few rusted metal cans lay scattered around the pit. To the left and the right of the fire pit, tunnels extended and disappeared into the darkness. I'd done my research for months, looking in the basements of dusty college libraries and used bookstores, scouring thrift stores, yard sales, and once I got to Birmingham, reading the papers, looking for reports of the missing. I had more doubts than clues, with only the scars upon my face as evidence that the thing I saw was real and not a paranoid fantasy of my own making. I knew I was in the right place when I saw what lay in front of us. At the end of the side tunnel, carved into the raw rock wall like some hillbilly Petra, rose the face of a large building that could only be a church. The carvings had a crude look to them, columns and lintels hammered out of the stone, with minors chiseled by men who might have seen a drawing of a Roman column in a newsprint. Crosses decorated the facing at various points, but my eyes were immediately drawn to the symbol above the only door. I recognized the symbol's loops and angles, but only in reverse, as I've only seen it in one other place, my own mirror, as a faint white tracery only visible now under the bright glare of the light reflecting off the scarred skin of my forehead. At that moment of recognition, as if in sympathy, my scars began to itch faintly, but the itch was there, a subtle warning. Get out. I knew I should listen, but it had taken so long to catch the faintest trace of the trail. Hey, look, a cave. I wonder what's inside, Petya said with a knowing smirk. She shouldered her pack and walked into the doorway. I had no choice but to follow her. The doorway opened into a small, low tunnel carved out of solid rock. After a few feet, the tunnel turned sharply left and turned again to the right, then opened into a larger room with a downward sloping floor. The remnants of wooden pews sat rotting silently on either side of the narrow aisle leading down to the front of the room. At the front, a few larger leather sacks leaned against a round structure that appeared to be an altar. As we moved closer, Petya let out a stifled squeak and stopped. She glanced at me, but I already knew. The leather sacks were in fact the desiccated remains of 3 people, hunched, headless, and kneeling at the altar. I stepped closer. What I'd originally thought of as an altar was in fact a pit or a deep well, its bottom hidden far below. Bodies, Petya said. A sidelong glance at her face showed me the shocked, bruised look about her eyes. She grimaced, then shouldered her pack. Jack will not be happy about this. Urbex hates finding bodies. At the least, bodies are creepy and unpleasant. At the worst, they can entangle a crew in months of police investigations, red tape, and possible trespassing charges. Let's try to steer Jack away from this for now, I said. In fact, let's head back. Petya nodded, and we left the church, Petya glancing over her shoulder at the well. When we arrived back at the clearing, Jack was missing, and he was furious. Eyes rubbed red and raw, upbraiding Charlie and Shane. That's rule number 1, Shane. Stick with your buddy. You guys act like I'm just a candy. Treat me like I'm Jack's Barbie doll who can't do anything. But I've been on more crawls than either of you two in the last year. Where were you, Shane? What were you doing? Shane stared at the ground, scuffing the dirt floor of the tunnel with his work boots. We were just... Look, this isn't helping. We need to find Jack, Charlie said. He couldn't have gotten far. He's probably down the tunnel taking pictures. You know how he gets when he's found a good subject. We spread out. Annie ran to the entrance but saw no sign of Jack. I checked a few of the wooden structures but found nothing. When we reached the end of the side tunnel in front of the church, Charlie wanted to check inside. Petya and I just came from inside there, I said. I glanced at Petya, who shook her head. She knew as well as I that the revelation of the 3 mummified corpses in the church would send the rest of the crew into a panic. If you want, I'll run in and check. Go look in these other buildings. I'll be right back. Charlie rounded up the others and walked down the tunnel to the right, calling Jack's name as they went. I turned and walked back into the church. As I followed the tunnel's turns, I noticed light shining from the well room. Dreading what I would find, I walked into the small room and found it as Petya and I had left it empty, save for the 3 mummified bodies clustered around the well. In Jack's large spotlight, positioned at the top of the well. Well, shit, Shane said, in that peculiar southern way that splits a single-syllable world into 7 or more syllables. He peered into the well, but his flashlight was unable to pierce the gloom at the bottom. Looks like Jack's exploring without us, I said. We should probably go down after him. I don't think that's a good idea, man, Charlie said, visibly shaking. The whole group was the 3 headless, mummified corpses squatting near the well did not help ease the tension in the room, and the group was decidedly angry at Petya and I for not mentioning them. You're going in there after them, Charlie, and he said. You owe it to him, and if you're too afraid to go, I'll go. We all go, Petya said. I've seen scary movies. We don't split up. Splitting up is when monsters get us. She shoved Shane out of the way, adjusted her headlamp, and began the descent. Annie followed, then Shane, and then Charlie. I climbed down the well shaft after the others, leaving that strange church in near darkness, illuminated only by the cold green glow of a few long-duration chem lights left at the top of the well. I've been lost in the dark before, and a little extra light can make all the difference. The tunnel at the bottom of the well smelled like blood. The others noticed it, and Charlie began some tentative explanation about the amount of iron or in the walls, but then trailed off. They could sense the wrongness of this place. Under the pervasive smell of rust and blood, there was another fouler stink. It wasn't so much a scent, but the memory of a scent, a recollection of the odor of something horrible that once passed this way and might yet come again. When we reached the first intersection, Charlie asked us to stop. He fished in his backpack and pulled out a can of highly reflective spray paint. "Charlie," Shane said, "Urbex doesn't leave traces. Worst case, they use chalk because it washes away with water. They don't spray paint anything. Screw this place, man." Charlie popped the top, shook the can, and sprayed a large arrow on the tunnel wall, pointing back to the well. "Screw it in the ear." Petcha startled us all with her cackled laughter. "In my ear." "Good one, Charlie." That set the rest of the group off and for a time eased the growing fear. We turned to the right and followed the new tunnel, periodically calling for Jack. The tunnel forked, split, and forked again. "There's miles of tunnels down here," Shane said. "How the hell are we going to find Jack in all this? He's not leaving any markers, and the floor is too hard to see his footprints." "We'll find him," Charlie said. "These tunnels have to go somewhere. What I'd like to know is why they're here. At first I thought this was a coal mine, but there's no bracing like I expected, so I thought maybe it was a saltpeter mine that would explain the lack of bracing. And the crazy tunnels. But I haven't seen either on any of these walls. None of this makes any sense." Annie, who had been quiet for a while, stopped. "Guys, I saw someone up ahead." "Jack," she yelled and ran forward. We followed, running in a stooped half-run so as not to hit our heads on the low tunnel ceilings. Annie called for Jack as she ran, gradually outdistancing us with her frantic pace. Up ahead, in the gloom, we saw her pause, turn her head to the left, then lunge down a tunnel branch. Annie slowed down. Shane yelled, even though the air was cool and the tunnel sweat beaded his face. We heard a thin shriek and then sobs. "Annie," Shane yelled again. We found Annie sitting on the floor of a room, the first of its size that we'd encountered. The floor was hard-packed earth, like the rest of the tunnels, but there were a few old wooden boards scattered around. Her pack was open in front of her, and she was muttering a quiet stream of obscenities. She'd removed a boot and was wrapping her foot in gauze from a first aid kit. "Sorry, guys. I tripped over a damn board. I guess I was going too fast. I didn't watch where I was going." Shane and Charlie hurried over to her, plucking like upset hens. Charlie pronounced Annie's ankle sprained. "I guess we should take a rest break," Shane said. "What time is it?" "About 3 o'clock in the morning," Charlie said, looking at his watch. "It feels like we've been down here for hours." "We should go back," Pettia said. Annie shook her head firmly. "No, I'm not leaving without Jack." "Look, Annie, I know you thought you saw him," Shane said. "But we don't even know if he's down here," Charlie said. "Yes, he is. We saw his spotlight at the top of the well," Annie said. "I know, but that's just it," Charlie said, taking a bite of a protein bar. "Jack's a pro. He wouldn't come down here without us. I've been thinking, what if we have it wrong? What if he left the spotlight behind while he went to find us and we somehow missed him?" "Oh my God," Annie said. "I bet he's terrified. Someone needs to go back and leave a note or something." As she tried to climb to her feet, her ankle turned, and Shane and Charlie both caught her. "You're definitely done exploring," Shane said. "All right, I'll take Annie back to the van. We'll leave notes for Jack along the way." "And Charlie?" Shane looked down. "I think it's time to call the cops." Charlie blew out a compressed breath. "Jack's gonna be pissed." "Yeah, he will. But he shouldn't have run off like this. And there's bodies down here, and we have an injury. You want to keep going on these field trips? We better play by the rules." "Give us 3 more hours, Shane," I said. "If we can't find Jack by dawn, no problem. We'll pack up and head to the entrance, and we'll call the cops. But I think we'll find it before then and call Roberto," Charlie said. Shane tightened his jaw. Roberto was Shane's ex, and they'd had a bad breakup, but Roberto was a long-term detective on the city's police force and could smooth things over for the group. "I know you're still pissed at him, but we need his help." Shane helped Annie up. She leaned on him as they staggered out of the room. I could tell from the set of Shane's jaw that he was pissed, but I knew Annie would make him call the cops. So I had 3 hours, maybe less. I hoped it would be enough time. I knew I might be able to break back into the side tunnel in another month or so, but my guess was that the site was about to become very popular with a lot of different people. I clenched my fist. I was very, very closer than I had really ever been. I was not about to let this opportunity slip away. I stood up, dusted off my jeans, and gathered the few items I'd pulled from the pack. Time to go find Jack. There's a lot of branches and tunnels down here, so remember to mark them, Charlie. I think we missed a few when we were running after Annie. I turned to Petya. You're the best mapper down here. Do you have any ideas of where we are? Yep, Petya said. We're about half a kilometer from the well, in a pretty straight line from there. Plenty of places for Jack to be. I say we do maze logic, pick the right-hand wall and follow it until it ends or loops back. We go for 90 minutes. If not Jack, we head back to well. Surely we'll find him before then, Charlie said. It's after 3 in the morning. He has to be tired. There couldn't possibly be anything that interesting. Charlie stopped, turned his head. Then I heard the screams. Mentally, I was prepared for this. I knew that I'd made a conscious decision to lead these kids into a trap and to use them as bait. I rationalized that by putting a few people at risk, I would be ultimately protecting many more. I knew that was just rationalization. In truth, I didn't feel guilty about putting my friends in danger. I felt guilty about not caring about them at all, when endangering them put me closer to my goal. Hey, Charlie yelled. We ran out of the room and down a tunnel towards the sound of her voice. I saw her first, lurching against the tunnel wall, dragging her injured foot, eyes deep socketed and huge in the bleached white mask of her face. Her shirt was splattered with spray of blood. Shane, she said. It got Shane. What got Shane? Petya asked. I don't know. We were close to the well. Shane kept saying he heard something walking behind us, but when we looked, there was nothing there. So we kept walking, and then there was something there, and it took him. Her face crumbled in grief. It just pulled him right out of my hands. I don't know if he knew what happened. His face. He just looked so confused. Petya took Annie's hand, and Annie clung to her, sobbing. I knelt with my pack on the tunnel floor and rummaged through it. When Charlie saw the gun, he stepped back a pace. Jesus, what the hell is that thing? It's a shotgun revolver, 6 chambers all loaded. If you have to use it, be really careful. It's got no safety to speak of. The gun scared the shit out of me. It was huge, making Dirty Harry's Magnum look like a squirt gun. It was heavy and unwieldy and hurt like a bastard to fire, but it was shorter than a shotgun and took shot shells, which was useful as I had hand-loaded every shell. I had no idea what might kill or even hurt the thing I hunted, but I had my hopes. Buckshot mixed with either rock salt, silver shot, gold shot, mercury, garlic, or finally, communion wafers and holy water. If that didn't work, I had some hollow point solid rounds that I could use on myself if it came to it. I pulled out 2 long hunting knives. Why would I have to use it? Charlie asked, pushing his glasses up and blinking rapidly. In case the thing down here with us gets me before it gets you. I handed the 2 knives to Charlie and Petya. Careful with those 2. They're sharp. I electroplated them myself. Will they work? Petya asked. I have no idea, I said. I picked most of this stuff up by watching Supernatural reruns. I'm making the rest up as I go. We're so screwed, Petya said and shook her head. I think they'll work. Worst case, it'll drive the thing off for long enough that we can get away. Annie, who had been very quiet, looked up at me. You knew. She lunged forward and punched me hard in the side of my face. I fell back and cracked my head on the tunnel wall. You knew. You knew something was down here. You bastard. You let us all down here as bait, Pip said and sighed. She stood up from her near crouch and eyed me with contempt. I got up, rubbing my throbbing forehead. Look, I've been hunting this thing for a long time. It's killed people, and it's my fault. I let it out, so it's my responsibility to take it down. And you're the one with the gun, Charlie said. Right? I'm the best chance any of you have of living through this. And I think that if there's anyone with a chance of hurting this thing, it's me. I stood and put the gun into a holster and put 2 moon clips each into my jacket pockets. I shouldered my pack. Let's go. Annie, take us back to where it got Shane. Everyone, stay behind me. I pulled the gun out again, and we started walking back down the tunnel toward the well. The trek back was far worse. Charlie's markers glittered like cat's eyes in a distant gloom, and we all kept seeing shadows at the corners of our vision. Twice I nearly wasted ammo on a slight imperfection in the tunnel wall. The weight and bulk of the shotgun pistol made it extremely uncomfortable to carry for any length of time, so I eventually settled for keeping it in the holster, pulling it out any time I thought I saw something. We could see the handholds of the well when we reached the area where Shane was taken. There was a great deal of blood splashed on the wall, and more trailed off down a tunnel that forked off from the main one. There's the well, I said. You 3 take the knives, climb up, and get out of here. Call for help. I'm going after it. I'm not leaving without Jack, Pettia said. She looked at Annie, then looked away. I remembered the way Pettia looked at Jack when she thought nobody was looking at her. Fair enough. I think we all know Jack's not. Jack didn't make it, Charlie said, wiping his eyes. But I'm not going without Shane, or at least finding out what happened to him. He turned away, weeping silently. We're coming with you, Annie said. I'm not leaving without Jack either, or at least without knowing what happened to him. And like Petcha said, we don't split up. You saw what happened to me and Shane when we went off on our own. I looked at all the blood on the ground. Nobody knows we're down here. They might find the van, but they won't find the entrance to the side tunnel. I've been in this kind of situation before. Things change when the cops show up. There will be a cave-in or a flood, or the cops will walk all down the length of the waterworks tunnel, and they simply won't see the hole we made because they can't, or because they don't really want it. If you follow me, I'm probably not going to survive this, so you won't either. Annie took a step closer to me and shook a fist in my face. You can get off your White Knight hero horse now. Asshole, she grabbed my collar and began to punctuate her sentences by shaking my head. Find my boyfriend. No. I stepped back against the wall and pushed her away. Fine. So be it. We followed the spatters and smears of blood down a long tunnel that snaked and twisted and sloped downward, gently at first, then more steeply. My scars had been itching faintly since I climbed down the well, but the itching had increased to a shrill, insistent whine against the nerve endings of my skin. I could feel the looping scrawl of each scar, so faint as to be invisible in daylight, etched into my face, as if held in place by a net of white-hot wires. The air in the tunnel began to thicken with moisture, the walls shining wetly in the reflected beams of our lights. I stopped, holding up a hand to warn the others. I see light from up ahead, I whispered. Somewhere down the tunnel, a pale golden light flickered. I pulled the revolver from its holster, cursing its weight for the 100th time. We continued down the corridor, cautiously and slowly, partly due to fear, and partly due to the floor, which was very steep and slick with moisture. The tunnel ended abruptly at a thin ledge that bordered a space wide and open and chaotic with shapes. At first I couldn't make sense of what I saw, the lines and forms overlapping and merging, like looking skyward at the moon through an ancient tree. We all stood on that ledge for a moment, gasping, maybe making some small sounds as our minds thought to process that. Gradually, my eyes traced the subtle lines and edges of structures clustered against the walls and claustrophobic clots and knots like a type of architectural tumor. The walls of the cavern receded out and away, plunging down into mist-shrouded depths, fading from my view. The structures were lit from indeterminate light sources, climbed in a dim gold light that did more to cast shadow than to reveal. As I stared, I began to notice the crumbled ledges, the blank and open entryways, the empty areas on distant walls where whole sections of the buildings had sloughed off and fallen into the pit far below. I noticed the stillness, the silence of the place. It's a city, Charlie said. A dead city, I replied. How can it be a city? There's no streets. Those doors open out onto thin air. That makes no sense, Annie said. It makes perfect sense if you have wings, I said. I gestured at a brighter area down the ledge to our right. That's where we're going. The ledge was smooth, its surface glassy but not slick. It seemed to emit a faint gold light that was only visible from the corner of my vision. We crept down the ledge for a few hundred yards, reaching a wide platform. Against one low wall was a large seat of sorts, and in front of that seat was a long, rounded, metallic table. Shane's corpse glistened wetly on the table. Chest cracked open. Ribs splayed wide like two open, skeletal hands. The top of his skull had been removed, and a mass of black tube snaked from the opening down to the table. No. Charlie wailed and ran to the table. "Charlie, don't," I said. Charlie reached the table and stopped. He reached out an arm and gently touched Shane's bloody face. Shane's eyes snapped open. I could see his lungs flutter in the raw cavity of his chest. His mouth worked silently, lips pulled back in a rectus grin, tongue thrusting against his teeth. His whole body began to twitch and spasm. Then the black tubes penetrating his skull writhed and pulled taut, and the spasm ceased. Shane's eyes rolled up in his sockets, and his eyelids closed, almost peacefully. Charlie whirled to face me, face contorted with rage and grief, silvered hunting knife held in a murderous grip in his hand. What did this do? What the hell did this to him? As if an answer, the thing hit him so fast it was a blur. Charlie let out a brief scream as he was hooked high up into the air, then screamed again in rage. I saw Charlie plunge the knife deep into the thing's abdomen, pull it out, and plunge it in again. The thing let out an ear-splitting shriek and let Charlie go. Annie Pettia, and I watched as Charlie fell, tumbling over and over into the depths. The thing crashed to the floor and skidded to a stop against the cavern wall. "Shoot it," Annie yelled. "Kill it now." The creature stood as I raised the gun with two shaking hands. The thing was huge, standing over 12 feet high. It took a staggering step forward on curiously backbent legs, then another. It shuddered, and I could see a milky, iridescent fluid seeping out of a wound on its belly. Its head snapped up and forward, and its eyes, there were so many, focused on me. I felt a disorienting tilt in my perspective, as if I were seeing myself in the room, and Pedron and Annie and the creature all at once. I felt the curiously mechanical ticking, and felt that the size of the thing was a mistake. It was much, much larger than it appeared. The creature spread its wings, 2 or 4 or 6, feathered and broad and black and leathery, tipped with hooks and talons, and flapped them once. Its scent billowed over all of us, the scent we smelled in the tunnels, acrid and dry, like oranges rotting in the desert sun. It came closer to us, and I felt it outside my mind, a pressure that was immense and cold and horribly, inhumanly logical. I waited, even though I could hear Annie and Petcha screaming behind me, screaming for me to shoot the thing. My scars were now twisting and rippling on my skin, white-hot and reaching a point so far beyond pain that I couldn't name it. I focused on that sensation and steadied my aim. The gunshot thundered deafeningly loud in the silence of the dead city. The shotgun revolver kicked viciously in my fist, and I nearly dropped it. The creature had closed nearly half the distance between us. It stopped, and some of its eyes seemed to blink. One of its wings seemed to droop, and I saw that my first round of rock salt and buckshot had punched a small ragged hole through its leathery membrane. I braced and fired again. The creature recoiled with a scream as the silver shot ripped open a jagged swath across its chest. I fired again and was rewarded with another scream. It was so close that its stink was suffocating. I fired again and again, the thing reaching out for me with so many arms, its wings fluttering so fast they were a blur. Then, it had me. 2 of its arms clutched me around the waist and pulled me up and close. 2 more arms reached up with taloned hands, black and scaly, crusted with impossible jewelry, and clasped both sides of my face. It turned my head from side to side, almost gently, and then looked deeply into my eyes. Of the many things I saw in those huge golden orbs, with their rings within whirling and spinning rings, the worst was recognition. The pressure outside my mind intensified, and I felt the snap, like a green stick fracture from a short, sharp fall, that came flooding through. It spoke to me then, not in words, but in a purer and older style of communication. It thanked me for bringing it more meals, and thanked me even more for bringing it information about the world from which it had been away for so very long. It promised me that I was its favorite, and I would be rewarded in some incomprehensible, impossible way. I felt a deep and loathsome love welling up in me for the thing, as a dog would unconditionally love its master. Then the creature screamed, shrieking in real pain. It was gone from my mind. I felt it recede like a tide, and I missed that presence, hating myself for feeling so. I fell to the ground in a heap as the creature stepped back, arms raised to its head. Petshaw had leapt onto the creature's back and was stabbing her long silver knife deep into the creature's eyes. The thing scrambled its many talented hands against her, leaving deep scratches on her arms, but she dodged and kept plunging the knife into the thing's eyes. Finally, with a deep guttural bellow, she slammed the knife deep into the center of the creature's skull. The wings stopped fluttering, and the thing toppled forward to the floor. Petia untangled herself from the thing's bulk and half stumbled to where I was sitting. Her face was ashen, and she held one arm with the other, blood oozing from long scratches on both. Annie shook herself and ran to Petshaw, dropping her backpack and pulling out the first aid kit. Neither of them looked at Shane. Once Annie had bound the worst of Petch's wounds, Petshaw stood up and walked over to the still form of the fallen creature. She kicked it. Savagely, once in the head, she stooped to remove the knife. "Leave it," I said. She turned to look at me. "I think it's better off where it is. It's dead." "I killed it," she said. "For now. But it might not be later, and that knife might postpone later for long enough it's time to go." Annie gestured at Shane's body. "What about him? We can't leave him here." "I know we can't," I said. "But none of us have the strength to carry him out, and we don't know if that thing is going to wake back up, or if there's more of them." That seemed to motivate Annie and Petshaw. Annie packed up her first aid kit, and we left the dead city by way of the tunnel from which we entered. I thought I saw the dim golden light growing fainter as we left, and that made me feel a slight bit of hope. The walk back to the well was long, far longer than I remembered. The lower tunnel floors were sloped upwards and slick. Annie and I both fell at least twice, which did nothing to improve my headache or Annie's sprained ankle. Petshaw had lost a shoe in the fight, and he'd kicked off the other one before leaving the cavern. I thought about that shoe a lot while walking out of those tunnels. I wondered what some future explorer would think upon discovering that platform in a dead city of angels, and on that platform, the creature's corpse and a single shoe. When we reached the well, I realized something had changed. I could see light at the top, much brighter than the few chem lights I'd left behind. Annie saw the light and began to shout for help. A familiar voice sounded down the well from the top, and his silhouette of a head blocked the light. "Annie, what are you doing down there?" Jack yelled. After much hugging and crying and kissing and a fair amount of punching, we got out of the well and back to the entrance of the side tunnel. Petshaw was unable to climb due to her injured arm. Jack and I helped get her out of the well using a Swiss seat he fashioned out of a rappelling rope. Annie was able to climb out of the well on her own, putting minimal weight on her injured foot. According to Jack, he left his spotlight at the edge of the well as a light source for some incredibly amazing photographs. Midway through, the cheap Zeiss lens somehow fell off of his camera and shattered on the stone floor. In a panic, he ran to the tunnel entrance to find a replacement, only to realize that he'd left his case of spares back at the van. Thinking he wouldn't be long, he ducked out into the waterworks tunnel and ran back to the van. "Yeah, man," Jack said. "That was totally stupid, guys. It was dark, and I was in a hurry to get back. So, I got my spare case and shut the back doors and locked the van, and I ran around the side of it. You know those big mirrors on that thing? That stick out like 3 feet on either side. Yeah, well, I clocked myself big time on one. I think I tore it off the mount. Anyway, it knocked me totally unconscious. I woke up maybe a half hour later with a killer headache, my face was all bloody, and it was light outside, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. I got my shit together and came back down here, but I couldn't find you guys. It's spooky as shit down here when you're alone. I was about to freak out until I heard some noises coming from the well, and then I was really gonna freak out." He paused to take a breath and a sip of water from a bottle. Man, Shane's gonna be pissed when he sees what I did to the van. Hey, where's Shane? And where's Charlie? Jack wanted to go back immediately. Neither Annie or Petra would allow it. He swore he was going to get a group of people together to find Shane and Charlie, or at least their bodies. He said he'd call in every favor he was owed, do whatever it took. His first call would be to Shane's brothers, both of whom were even larger than Shane, and both of whom owned enough firepower to take over a small country. I agreed, and promised to help, but I was already planning to slip away as soon as I could. Jack's search party might find a side tunnel, but the entrance would be collapsed, or the tunnel would be there, and even the buildings inside, but the well would be full of dirt or simply missing. No amount of drilling or explosives or ground-penetrating radar would ever uncover that dead city. Annie and Pet Shop both hugged me to my surprise as we stood in the parking lot across from Jack's apartment. I shook Jack's hand and promised to call him after I got some rest. I put my gear into the trunk of my old, battered, blue Toyota Corolla. As I was driving away, Annie embraced Jack again. His eyes caught mine over her shoulder. Then one lid drooped in a slow, lurid wink, and in that moment, in the late morning light, the other eye flashed gold, like gold rings spinning inside gold rings. Then it was gone. It could have just been a trick of the light. I know what's out there. I've known for a while. Some people will tell you that they're just like us. They'll humanize them, put them on our level. Those people are wrong. The creatures out there aren't human, no matter how much they look like us. Some of them used to be, but they gave that up a long time ago, and there's no going back. They're nothing more than animals now. Snarling, vicious things that can never truly be trusted. Even if they smile and tell you that they're domesticated, they'll feed on you the second it's convenient for them. Mark my words. I've seen their work for most of my life. Vampires, sirens, werewolves, fae, monsters. A lot of them so-called apex predators, feasting on us just because they can. Well, I'm not inclined to take it. That's why I joined the Brotherhood. A lot of the folks in the Brethren Knights of St. Fontaine were born into it. Not me. I earned my place amongst their ranks. It started off a few years back when I took down some vampire they've been tracking. Roberto. I've been working solo for a few years by that point, and I stumbled on him by chance. I was using this girl as bait. Pretty little thing named Michelle. She brought the creeps in, and I dealt with them. I'll admit, I've always let my anger get the better of me when dealing with their kind. Maybe it would just be easier to put a bullet in their head and be done with it. But no, they deserve so much worse. I've seen firsthand the suffering caused by the death they leave in their wake. I've seen the misery they sow in the lives of each and every single one of their victims. See, when you kill someone, you aren't just ending their life. No, you're ending the lives of everyone who loved them. You're tearing this hole in their hearts that'll never be filled again. I've seen it. More times than I can count. I've seen what it does to people. And these sons of bitches just walk around for centuries, destroying life after life. They do it because they can. Hell, some of them probably do it because it's fun. So yeah, I think a bullet to the head is too good for most of them. It's necessary for some, but for others, well, I make sure they get what's coming to them. Back then, my favorite method was to pull out the teeth. It was a faster process for vampires than it was for sirens. Less teeth to pull out, but it still hurts. Naturally, when I got my hands on Roberto, that's exactly what I did to him. Michelle brought him in from the bar to the hotel room we'd rented, where I was waiting for him. I took out his knees while she distracted him. I had a pistol with a silencer. One shot to the back of each leg to drop him. Then I got my pliers and I set to work. He fought. They all fought. But it didn't matter. Michelle wouldn't usually stick around. Didn't have the stomach for it. She'd just leave and I'd pay her the next morning, after I was done with the bloodsucker. I had all sorts of nasty little methods for dealing with him, with Roberto. I just went to town on him with my fist. It feels good to do it that way sometimes. He was one of those pretentious, prissy vampires. One of the ones who thought he was all that. You know, I tied him down and I showed him that he wasn't. I just went to town. His nose broke first, then his jaw. He was snappy with me for the first couple of hits, but after about 20 minutes, he was begging for me to let him go. After 40 minutes, he was crying. After an hour, he was dead. It was just another night for me at the time. I dumped that asshole into the bathtub, and I left him for housekeeping to deal with. I never expected it to catch up to me, and I sure as hell didn't expect it to lead where it did. It was about 3 weeks later that the Brotherhood found me. I'd been at a burger joint, grabbing some lunch, minding my own damn business, when I noticed a group of guys walk in. They didn't look like locals. I was living in a small town in Arizona at the time, and nobody walked around dressed like that. They all wore tailored black suits, as if they were coming from some fancy business meeting. There were 3 of them. 2 of them kept their distance. They sat at a nearby booth and just watched. The last one walked right up to me, looking at him. He was obviously the guy in charge. He was somewhere in his 60s and bald, but he carried himself with this importance that was kind of hard not to admire. Without asking, he pulled out a chair across from me and sat down, folding his hands neatly in front of him. I just stared at him the whole time, and I knew some of the other folks in the restaurant were giving him some odd glances too. But he didn't so much as bother looking in any other direction but mine. Am I in some kind of trouble? I asked, setting down my lunch. That depends. Have you any sins to confess? The old man replied. Now that got a laugh out of me. I leaned back in my chair, sizing the old man up again as I tried to figure out if he was for real or not. Are you some kind of priest or something? I am looking to get saved, mister. Something like that, he began. Although if you wanted salvation, there are other men who could grant you that. It's Lucas, right? Lucas Van Coverdin. Quite an exquisite name. It's just Lucas, if you don't mind. The rest of it is a bit much, I replied. The old man smiled. Lucas, he said. A good name, all the same. A strong name. You can call me Roy. Roy Bergman. It's a pleasure to meet you. He offered a hand to shake. I didn't shake it. So what can I do for you, mister? Bergman? I asked. I'm gonna assume you ain't here because I've got a pretty name. Of course not, Roy assured me. Of course not. I'm here because my friends and I are fans of your work. I raised an eyebrow and started listening a little closer. One of your recent, customers, Roberto. He was a man we were interested in for quite some time. Your, methods may be cruder than some of us might like, but you are effective. The good work you've done has made that very clear, Roberto. I repeated. It took a few moments to remember just who that was. So you like that? Are you re-familiar with some of my other projects, VR, Roy said? And I, for one, am impressed. Talent like yours is not present in everyone. Many don't have the stomach for it, but for those that do, there are doors that are open for them, places where they can find others like them. That's so. I asked. Indeed. This calling of ours, it's a dangerous one. Doing it alone usually only ends one way. But as part of a brotherhood of like-minded men, sharing the same common goals. Are you trying to recruit me? I interrupted, cracking a small smile. Only if you're interested. But I suspect that we share a goal. Perhaps you'd like to discuss it in private. See if I'm right. What I have to lose, I thought. I picked up my burger again and took a bite. Before glancing at Roy's buddies, sitting a few tables away. A security detail for both of us, he said. We both have enemies. Experience has taught me it's better to come prepared. I'll bet, I said, polishing off the last of my burger. Hey, you got a place we can talk shop then? Roy looked back at me, a small grin tugging at the corners of his lips. Why don't we go for a ride? I'll tell you everything. I told him to lead the way. As we left the burger place, Roy led me towards a black SUV parked out front. His buddies got in the front seats. Roy and I sat in the back. So I asked, tell me about this little club of yours. Then I'll tell you if I'm game or not. They're an old organization, Roy replied. We've christened ourselves as the Brethren Knights of St. Fontaine. Okay, so what? Are you some sort of religious group, then? Yes and no. You could call us a splinter group. The original Brotherhood was born in the years after the fall of the Knights Templar. See, even while their brothers burned for crimes they'd never committed, some of the remaining knights refused to give up their holy missions. So they renounced the church, went underground, took on a new name, and continued their holy mission. Or so I'm told anyways. Not a lot of records left of how it all started. But what I know for sure is that they all did God's work. They became increasingly aware of the devil's children roaming this world, and so they pledged themselves towards their eradication. That is how it has been since our order began. While many of our current members are still quite steadfast in their faith, it isn't a requirement. It used to be that membership was passed from father to son, but that isn't the way to keep it. Brotherhood alive. Never was, and we know it. We're in need of new recruits who know what they're doing and have the drive to do what is necessary. While once upon a time faith might have been a foundation of the Brotherhood, today it's less about God and more about man. Our mission is simple: to guarantee the survival and supremacy of mankind against those who would seek to destroy us. It's a dramatic way of saying we kill those who would kill us. Suppose I can get behind the simplicity of that. I said most can. Vampires don't care about God, and it doesn't require a holy man to kill one. Only a man willing to do what is necessary. Okay, so how do I get in? I asked. You want me to fill out a form or something? Roy just laughed. Membership isn't so simple, but I thought you might be interested. I spoke with one of our leaders, Brother Gallon, about sponsoring you. Usually what that means is that you will be given a trial of sorts, a mission during which you'll be given the opportunity to prove your birth and your devotion to the cause. Shit, is that all? I asked. Sounds like a cakewalk to me, man. You got a target in mind? As a matter of fact, I do. Roy said. Two, in fact. Some of the most high profile we've ever gone after. I won't lie to you. These are ambitious targets. Maybe too ambitious for a trial, but you're a little more experienced than your average recruit. I thought you might appreciate the challenge. A lot of vampires. I seem to think of them like monarchs, queens. They've certainly earned the title. Our intel suggests they've been organizing the vampires on the West Coast for a few decades now, helping them survive and thrive, kill them, and we may just destabilize them. Set them back and send them running into the shadows. He took a folder from a pouch behind a driver's seat and offered it to me. Help us pull this off. And not only are you a part of the Brotherhood, you can send the undead a message that their time is over. I opened the folder and was greeted by photographs of two women. Both of them were blonde, with olive skin and green eyes. They were clearly sisters, maybe even twins, although it was clear to tell who was who. Mia and Leah Darling, I murmured, reading over the attached files. They don't look like much. Well, intel says otherwise, he began. Some of the creatures we've interrogated have claimed they're baptized, blessed by Satan himself with some infernal power. We'll see how much that's worth. What's that supposed to mean? I asked. Infernal power. Allegedly, they're harder to kill, he began. You and I have killed more than our fair share of vampires. We both know that they all go down the same if you're in. Then you can pack your things tonight and meet me at the airport tomorrow. We've saved you a seat on a flight to Los Angeles. Did you now? Well, that was awful, sweetie, I said, half joking, and handed the file back to Roy. Well, I guess I'll be seeing you tomorrow then. I could tell that my new buddy was awfully glad to hear that. I could see a warm smile creep across his face. Well then, I'm looking forward to working with you, Lucas, he said, before offering me a hand to shake. I'll be seeing you tomorrow. Now, I've done a fair bit of traveling for my own hunting purposes, but I've never been all the way out to Los Angeles before. I'd always imagined it would be some prissy cosmopolitan shithole. And you know what? I was completely right. I really can't say I've got a lot of kind things to say about LA, other than it was probably a vampire's paradise. Active nightlife, plenty of shitty neighborhoods where I can't imagine anybody looks too hard at the dead bodies. Yeah, I could easily see why a couple of so-called vampire queens would have set up shop there. The hotel we got was in the nicer part of town, at least. I got my own room, and brought some of my nicer clothes to join Roy and his two buddies for lunch after we got settled in. On the flight's end, he'd introduced them as Brian Adams and Sean Reach, although I hadn't spoken much to either of them. They mostly just seemed to follow Roy. He was obviously the man running the show. Now our best bet is to catch them separately, Roy had said over lunch. We got another brother in town who's been keeping tabs on them. You'll meet him later. According to him, Leah Darling rarely leaves their penthouse. She has visitors in and out during the day, but she only leaves to attend the odd social event, parties, nightclubs. He suspects she often hunts there, as there have been a few suspicious deaths, however. He also thinks that she has a stable supply of blood inside her home. Spooking her could cause her to seal herself inside, and who knows how long she can wait us out. We can't get in? I asked. Set up some sort of business meeting. They're looking into it, but Leah appears to be choosy on who she'll meet with, he replied. I scoffed. Of course she was. Well, what about the other one? I asked. Mia? She'll likely be an easier target. She comes and goes as she pleases, but has a fairly predictable routine. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evening, she's at the gym, and on Saturday and Sunday nights, she tends to visit various nightclubs. She usually brings her prey back home, but we haven't seen her kill any of them yet. Ain't that sweet? A vampire with a conscience, I teased. If she's the easier target, could we capture her? Use her to lure out the other one? Perhaps, assuming she'd take the bait, Roy noted. But keeping her captive might prove an issue. We're going to kill her anyway, I said with a shrug. The hell doesn't matter if we do it before or after we got the other one. I could see Roy thinking it over. I suppose not. Our sources indicate the sisters are close. We might succeed in emotionally compromising the other one if she thinks we have her sister. She may not think rationally, all the more reason to do it. I said, and we know she'll be there tomorrow, don't we? At the gym. You said she's got a routine. Roy chuckled and leaned back in his seat. He looked over at Brian beside him, grinning from ear to ear. Listen to this. I love this boy. Already eager to get the job done. His attention returned to me. Tomorrow night, then, he said. Let's see what you've got, killer. I wasn't looking to let the old man down. The gym Leah Darling frequented was a more upscale place, the kind of gym where you might find the odd celebrity slumming it. That didn't really surprise me. Their file had indicated that the twins had good money, and the name Darling sounded familiar. I heard it tossed around in the same sentences as other luxury fashion brands some folks gave a shit about. Personally, I never saw the appeal of that kind of thing. And truth be told, I kind of like the idea of putting one of those high and mighty fashion mogul types in their place. Mia Darling sure as hell looked the part of a fashion model, too. Blonde hair, green eyes, olive skin, and stunningly beautiful. She was almost statuesque in a way, and according to the pictures, her sister looked just about the same. That said, Mia was a little beefier than her sister, with broader shoulders and a more muscular physique. Comparing her to Leah, who, judging by the pictures, was a scrawny little thing that looked like she could be blown over by a gust of wind, well, Mia was the one I'd have been more afraid of. She was doing body weights in one of the rooms when we got there. Push-ups, planks, burpees, shit like that. I dressed for the occasion as had my escort. Brian and Sean had been sent along with me. Roy didn't fit in quite as well at the gym scene and had instead opted to watch the door. Out of the lot of us, I'd say that Brian probably blended in best. He looked more at home in workout clothes and a baseball cap than he did in a suit. We picked some machines across from the room where Mia was doing her workout so we could watch her and chat quietly amongst ourselves. So how are we going to lure her out? Sean asked. Lots of witnesses. We can try and get her out when she leaves, Brian said. We got Roy outside. He could slash her tires. Use that to isolate her. No, she called for help. I interrupted. We need to be more creative. I scanned the room, looking for some ideas. It didn't take me long to find one. You two up for some body weights? Can you lock her in? I asked. Sure. You got a plan, though? Brian asked. Kinda. I know how to get her alone. With that, I got up and headed toward the hallway with the locker rooms. Looking back, I saw Brian and Sean heading for the room Mia was in. Good to know they were willing to trust me. I wasted no time in heading into the men's locker room. Nobody else was there, just me. I found the fire alarm pretty quickly. It seemed like the easiest way to get rid of the witnesses. We could deal with a darling girl and slip her body out through the back before anybody realized what we were doing. I pulled a handle. The alarm blared. It was worth a die on my hands. I could already see it in my head. A bunch of gym rats looking up in concern and confusion before leaving. I knew Mia would try and do the same, and she'd run right into Brian and Sean. Best not to keep them waiting. A lot of the people were already at the door when I made it back onto the gym floor. None of them paid us any mind. Soon enough, we'd be well enough along. Brian and Sean stood dutifully by the door to the room Mia was in. I could see a gun in each of their hands, and I pulled my own .45 from my sweatpants before joining them. Sorry about the chaos, I said as I walked past Brian and Sean. I had to make sure we weren't disturbed, though. Mia just cocked her head slightly. She didn't look the slightest bit intimidated, if anything. She just looked annoyed. Hell of a way to introduce yourself, she said. So, tell me what this is about, or are you going to just shoot me? I cracked a small smile. Not much fun in just shooting you, is there? I asked. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Roy coming in through the front door. He approached us slowly, walking in behind me. Mia, darling, he said softly. I've heard a lot about you, and yet I've heard nothing of you, she replied. I'm being very patient right now, but my patience is running thin. What do you want? Oh, that's quite simple, Roy assured her. I want what you're trying to take from us. Supremacy. I must admit, I never thought anyone would ever be able to organize those creatures, but you and your sister have done an admirable job. So that's what this is about, Mia said wistfully. If you're concerned about vampires, then you and I really shouldn't be enemies. We want the exact same things as you do. Order, peace, safety. There is no safety with your kind in this world, Roy replied. All of us have seen that much firsthand. Well, it's a difficult job, ruling over subjects who often view themselves as above law and morality. But someone needs to take control, she said. I disagree, Roy said. See, I think that what we need is a world free of you, your kind, your hunger, your corruption. So many innocent human lives are lost because of what you and your kind do. And yet here you are, telling me that you're looking to make it better. Empires aren't built overnight. You may not remember the way things used to be, but I do, Mia said. Trust me. Without us, it would be worse, she said. Roy just shrugged. Agree to disagree then, he said, before waving his hand. You know what to do. I was the first one to pull the trigger. The bullet struck Mia straight in the head, tearing away a chunk of her skull. Roy stepped back, letting Sean, Brian, and I open fire on her. I unloaded 3 rounds into her body. I don't know how many times Sean and Brian shot her, but she took a few steps back from the impact as blood spattered against the gym mirrors behind her. I expected her to fall, to collapse like a puppet with her strings cut, but Mia, darling, continued to stand. Well, I suppose that's one way to end a discussion, she said. Her head moved, her remaining eye fixated on me. I watched as the blood that should have spilled down her face instead seemed to float outwards, droplets suspended in the air before they began to flow backward into her head. I watched as Mia's wounds healed, as if they hadn't even been there in the first place. Her body seemed to reconstruct itself. The chunk torn out of her skull seemed to mend itself back together, and the wounds on her body closed up as if they'd never even been there. But I don't die like the others of my kind you've likely killed. You'll need to do better. I swore under my breath, and I raised the gun to fire again. But Mia moved so much faster. With blinding speed, she crossed the room. Sean went first. He fired, but she grabbed him by the wrist, twisting his arm and sending him down to the ground with a heavy thud. Brian went next. Just like before, she lunged for him with blinding speed and grabbed him by the shirt before hurling him towards the mirrors she'd been standing in front of a moment ago. I was the last to go down. Before I could react, Mia was just a breath away from me. I tried to move my gun, but I couldn't keep up with her. I felt her elbow me in the stomach before she lifted me off the ground and hurled me back down. When the world stopped spinning, I saw her standing in front of Roy. I almost expected her to hit him too, but no. She just looked him in the eye and spoke in a cold, calm voice. "You should consider yourself fortunate. I'm much more forgiving than my sister is. This time you'll walk away, but provoke us again. Well, I won't be able to hold my sister's hand a second time." Roy just stared at her, calm and unflinching. Then he quietly stepped aside and let Mia pass. She walked out without even looking back at us. "What the hell was that?" I heard Sean say. He picked himself up and was tending to Brian. Roy just watched as Mia walked out the front door. He thought for a moment before answering. That was a warning. Slowly, I picked myself up. I grabbed my gun and for a moment considered running out and taking another shot at Mia, but I had a feeling that wouldn't go well for me. "So what's plan B?" I asked. "Drastic measures," Roy said. "They obviously can't be killed like an ordinary vampire," Roy said. As we ate a quiet dinner, alone in my hotel room, Sean and Brian had already turned in for the night. It was just the two of us. "They'll need something more severe," he began. "Something they can't heal from. Holy weapons would be ideal. But our organization hasn't possessed those for a number of years now. I don't suppose you know where to get some?" I asked. "Afraid not. We used to have a selection of daggers we could use in situations like these, but the last one we had was destroyed a few years back, attempting to kill one of the devil's more prominent avatars. So that ain't gonna work," I sighed, and I racked my brain trying to think up something new. "Hey, what about fire? You know, like an explosion of some sort. Bomb the shit out of him. Perhaps we could acquire something, but we need an opportunity. Perhaps during one of their nightclub visits. Assuming we can catch them during one," he said. "Bomb him at a nightclub," I asked. "Ain't that kind of risky? Lots of people in the crossfire. The lives of a few drunk partygoers aren't of much consequence when you weigh them against what we hope to kill," Roy replied. "I would argue that this is an acceptable sacrifice, don't you? I thought we were doing this to save people, though." "We're going to kill a lot more," I said. "It's a hard choice," Roy agreed. "Look me in the eyes, Lucas. We both know that this is a hard choice." I did. I looked him in the eye, but I'm not so sure about what I saw. "Our mission ad hominem is for humanity," he began. "That's what it means. Throughout history, great men have made sacrifices for the sake of the greater good. You saw what I saw of that vampire. You saw what she's capable of. They're using those people as a shield. They're counting on us being too weak to exploit it. It's our duty to prove them wrong. Do you understand that? Because if we don't, those people are dead anyways. They'll kill more than them in just a few years. It's a matter of numbers. Simple as that." I caught myself frowning a little, but I supposed he had a point. We could either deal with collateral or risk missing our chance. I wasn't exactly thrilled by the prospect of collateral damage, but how else would we get a shot at them? Even bombing their penthouse wasn't a sure deal, and would be even riskier. This was the better option. "They're moderately public figures, right?" I asked. "Might be an event coming up where Leah would be expected to show. I can't imagine the other one would be far away if she did." "We can look," Roy replied. "See what we can find. In the meanwhile, I've got some connections. We can get someone to set something up for us, so long as V gets the opportunity." With that, Roy got up. "We'll deal with it tomorrow. For now, I'm tired." He headed for the door before pausing and looking back at me. "Oh, and Lucas, despite today's failure, you did well. Be proud of yourself for that much." I nodded at him. "Well, thank you kindly, sir." I raised a beer to him, and then he was gone. The next few days passed quietly. I let Roy do what he needed to do. Me, Brian, and Sean focused on smaller jobs to keep ourselves busy, helping some of the local brotherhood deal with little threats here and there. Nothing special, but it was fun, I guess. It was after one of those little hunts when I got back to my room that I found Roy waiting for me. "Having fun?" he asked, half jokingly. "Having a blast," I replied. "You look like you got something to say, so you might as well say it." I'll keep it brief, he assured me. There's a party at the Ivory nightclub in 2 days. You're going to be there. I paused as I went to fix myself a drink from the minibar. The Darlings? I asked. He nodded. I've arranged for a package to be delivered to us tomorrow. Find a good place for it, somewhere close to the twins where it won't attract attention. Then a cold smile crossed Roy's face. Well, sounds easy enough, I said. I like your attitude, boy. If this goes off, you'll have officially earned your place among our ranks. Exciting, isn't it? He was right. It was. The night of the party wouldn't come soon enough. Roy and I went alone, driving in an SUV. He held a briefcase with him, one I'd never seen before. He didn't need to tell me what was in it. I could figure that much out myself. He never got out of the car when we parked in front of the nightclub. He just wordlessly handed the briefcase to me and offered me a warm, almost gentle smile. Make us proud, Lucas. I nodded at him. I had no intention of failing. I walked into that nightclub as if I owned a place, scanning the crowd for the twins. It didn't take me long to find them. Leah and Mia Darling sat together at a booth near the back. Neither of them appeared to notice me. Looking around, I spotted another empty booth beside them. The perfect hiding spot. In and out. It was going to be so damn simple. I moved through the crowd towards the empty booth. I didn't bother them too much. Maybe I was just being soft, but I didn't want to look at them. I didn't want to see their faces. A lot of these folks were about to die, and none of them were going to understand why. But it was just as Roy said, matter of numbers. I made it to the booth and sat down, setting the briefcase under it and kicking it back out of sight. I exhaled the breath before looking out at the party in and out. I could do this. The funny thing is, I don't think a single person really paid me much mind as I got up to leave the club. When I reached the door and looked back, the only ones who seemed to be looking at me were the Darling twins, still seated at their booth. I could see a look of resignation on Mia's face, with maybe a little bit of frustration. Leah, on the other hand, her fingers were steepled as she sat back in the booth, her legs casually crossed. I couldn't figure out what the look on her face meant. Not at the time anyways. Looking back now, I realized that she was laughing at me. We were a few blocks away when the bomb went off. I heard the rest of it on the news. 12 dead. A lot less than I'd expected, actually. I was a little relieved by that. I'm no explosives expert, but looking at the video of the scene I saw in the days that followed, the bomb should have killed more people. Not that I'm complaining. The less needless blood on my hands, the better, right? Of those 12, I was hoping the 2 of them were the twins. They must have been right there when the blast went off, but I never heard anything for sure. Roy had me knighted as a member of the Brotherhood the day after the bomb went off. I figured that was probably the end of it. I should have known better. It was 3 days after we killed the Darling twins, and it was meant to be my last day in LA. I booked my flight home and was minding my own damn business at the hotel bar. I hadn't seen Roy that day, or Brian or Sean, but that was fine. They had their own shit to settle. I didn't notice her coming in. She moved without making a sound, and it wasn't until she spoke from the seat beside me that I realized she was even there. I warned you, I almost jumped at the sound of her voice as I looked over at her. Mia Darling didn't have a damn scratch on her. Her skin was perfect. She was dressed in a clean white button-down shirt with cuffs undone. She watched me from the corner of her eye, almost looking jaded. I told you, she's not as forgiving as I am. But you didn't listen, did you? What the hell? No. Did? Mia interrupted. Sorry to disappoint you, but I don't die like other vampires. She finally turned her head to look at me. Let's go for a ride, Lucas. She wants to show you something. With that, Mia stood up and gestured for me to follow. I thought about going for my gun, putting a bullet in the back of her head, but I already knew that wasn't going to work, so I did the only thing I could. I got up and I followed. Mia's car was waiting outside. She drove in silence, refusing to respond to me even when I tried to talk to her. Not that I tried much. Truth be told, I was waiting for her to kill me, but she just kept driving out towards the edge of the city, then in along the coast. We drove for the better part of an hour before she stopped in the middle of the highway. She put the car in park before turning to look at me. "So this is where you're going to do it?" I asked. "Do what? Kill you?" she asked. No, not me at least. Depending on how you speak to Leah, though. Well, we'll see. For what it's worth, I did put in a word for you. Consider it the last kindness I'll grant you. If you choose to waste it," Mia shrugged nonchalantly, "well, then I've done all I can to spare your life, and you're the one who threw it away, not me." "How generous of you," I murmured. "You're welcome. Goodbye, Lucas. I hope this is the last time we see each other." I didn't respond as I got out of the car and looked around. It didn't take me long to spot it, but she brought me to see. They were lined up on the beach, about 15 of them, give or take crucifixes, each one carrying the body of a man. And beneath them stood Leah Darling, her hands behind her back as she waited for me. Slowly, I approached her. "The new recruit," she crooned. "So you've finally come to join your new brothers. But it seems my sister has ensured I've no place to put you." "A shame. What? What did you do?" I asked. My voice cracked as I looked up at the crucified man. In the golden light of the setting sun, I recognized Roy, stripped naked and lashed to one of the crosses near the middle. Next to him, I saw Brian and Sean. I saw other men I recognized, other members of the Brotherhood, the very ones who'd inaugurated me just a few days before. "Were it up to me, I would have hunted your organization down to the last man and strung them up here," she said. "But my sister believes in diplomacy. So here we are. Welcome to my diplomatic solution." She extended her arms in the glow of the setting sun. She looked almost like a goddess, ready to unleash her wrath. "Witness my generosity firsthand and share it with your Brotherhood. Mercy is a gift I only ever grant once. Next time, this ocean will run red for generations with the blood of your brothers. That I promise you." I remained frozen to the spot, staring at her. I looked at the corpses of Roy and the others, still unable to believe they were dead, but I could see them. They were way past my help. She hadn't brought me here to save them. She brought me here to taunt me. Looking into this woman's eyes, I knew that what she was saying was more than just a bunch of empty threats. These were promises she meant to keep. Leah approached me, drawing close enough that I could smell her perfume. "Do you understand?" she asked, her voice low and cold. I couldn't speak. All I could do was weakly nod. "Good. Then this is farewell. Make sure it's permanent." She brushed past me, heading to Mia's car and leaving me alone before the row of crosses. When I looked back, the twins were long gone, and soon so was I. I've done all I can to further the Brotherhood's mission in the years since I encountered the Darling twins. My belief in what we stand for hasn't wavered. I can't rightly say I'm proud of everything we've done. Some of it ain't much to be proud of, but it is necessary. Everything I've done has been absolutely necessary. I've seen firsthand what we're up against. I've seen the horrible depths of their brutality up close, and I hate them all the more for it. One of these days, I'll come back for those twins. One of these days, I'll kill them. But it ain't gonna be any time soon. Not until I know for sure I can do it. Not until I know I can win. Until then, I've made sure we've heeded their warning. There's something very wrong with this radio station. I saw the job ad a few days ago. Some radio station out in the desert was looking for a night shift DJ. The listing said 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Now, I had never heard of this station before, but I was your typical struggling actor hoping to make it big in LA. Even if it was just spinning tracks and chatting into a mic, it was a start. Besides, the pay was way higher than acting, so I hit them up. They hired me right away. They said the station needed me to start immediately. In fact, they said they'd give me a bonus if I showed up that same night. I arrived at the station way before my shift was supposed to start. The desert went on forever around the small building. I would have missed it. If it weren't for the massive radio tower, it was huge, especially for such a small station. It was old and covered in rust. It creaked every time the wind blew. A small sign next to the door said Radio Harmony. On the doorknob on the front door, there was a key labeled Ben. Now the job wasn't glamorous, but I couldn't help but feel excited. I let myself in and looked around. The hiring manager told me I'd be alone at the station tonight. He also mentioned they never broadcasted during the day. Now the inside looked exactly how I expected, small and functional. The office was cluttered with papers and coffee cups. Next to it was an old DJ booth from the 80s. Off to the side was a tiny bathroom. Luckily for me, they had a working coffee machine. The place felt cozy in a nuclear bunker kind of way. I wandered into the office, cleaning up random paper cups as I went. Figured I might as well tidy up a bit. I was going to spend the entire night here after all. On the desk was a manual on how to operate the equipment. I opened it and I saw someone had left me a note. It was a piece of paper with my name on top in big bold letters. Under it was a list of rules. I looked them over one by one. Number 1, do not ignore calls. Number 2, always play the midnight record at 12 a.m. Number 3, no dead air. Number 4, never open the door for anyone who knocks twice. Number 5, end your shift with a goodbye song. And number 6, do not leave the station during your shift. Okay, not too bad. Seemed easy enough. I made my way to the DJ booth, flicking on the lights as I passed. The space was cramped, but it had this retro charm to it. A single window looked out into the desert. Papers were piled up in the corners. Vinyl records lined the walls. An old mixing board sat on a desk. Connected to it was a phone, a bunch of different players, and a bulky old laptop. I sat down and put on the headphones. This was it. This was my domain now. Settling into the DJ booth, it felt like stepping into a different world. I noticed a copy of the rules had been taped on my desk. I guess they're really hammering these homes, I said to myself. I checked my watch at almost 9 p.m. I turned on the equipment, the lights and screen coming to life under my fingers. The laptop had a music database of the usual hits from 10 years ago. At the top of the list was the station ID. All right, showtime. I settled in and clicked play. It was old school, just a simple 4-note melody as a woman called out the station's name. As soon as the ID ended, the phone rang. Rule number 1 flashed in my mind. I picked up the phone and said, "Radio Harmony, you're on there." The voice that came through was unexpected. "Welcome, Ben Morris. Excited for you to start the night." I blinked, confused. "Thanks, but how did you?" But before I could finish, the caller was gone. The line went dead. Now, I hadn't said my name on the air yet. Maybe that was one of the station's staff, but I couldn't think about that now. One of the rules said no dead air, so I queued up Dancing in the Dark. Seemed fitting. "Here's a bit of the boss for you," I announced, pressing play. The first hour of my shift at Radio Harmony passed by smoothly. I found myself getting into a groove, introducing songs with a bit of backstory or fun fact here or there. I imagined I was talking to someone driving through the desert, or someone at home who needed company after a long day at work. I'd sip my coffee between tracks. Glad the coffee machine did actually work. Occasionally, I'd look over at the rules and reread them. I wanted to be very sure I didn't break any on my first night. Then, in the middle of a Steven Tyler song, the phone rang. I cut off the music and took the call. It was the same guy who called me earlier. "Can you play track 86 for me?" he asked. "Track 86, I repeated, my eyes scanning our song list. He snapped at me, running out of patience. It was like a switch just flipped. "Yes, track 86, you idiot. It's not that hard, kid. Don't need to come down there and show you how it's done." "Okay, sir, I'm just not sure what you mean," I said. I was panicking a little because we were still live on air. Being harassed by some random caller was the last thing I needed on my first night. No less on the desk. "Are you stupid or something?" "Track 86. The caller continued. I moved papers around until I found what he wanted. Buried under newspaper clippings was a cassette marked Track 86. I set it up as the caller continued to swear at me. I wondered if we'd get in trouble for broadcasting the kind of language he was using. But finally the cassette played. It was a weird mix of woodwind instruments without lyrics. The angry caller's tone shifted completely once the music filled the air. "Thank you," he said. His voice was now soft, almost sleepy, and then he hung up. Now that left me rattled. I glanced at the track for 10 minutes. Well, if it kept that guy off my back, I would take it. It was a good time to make some coffee. But who the hell was that guy? I wondered if this was some kind of different station, the kind that attracted a dedicated fan base of weirdos. I wasn't even sure how far the station broadcasted. As I stood up, I couldn't notice how old everything looked. It was like nobody had come in here for ages. Dust covered almost everything. I remember that I hadn't actually met anyone from Radio Harmony in person. The only one I talked to was the guy who hired me over the phone. Said he was a former DJ. Was he the one who wrote out the rules? I got back just in time to catch the end of the weird song. The very second that it did, the phone rang again, and it was him, the same caller before he could say anything. I beat him to the punch. "Who are you? You get a name, my man," I asked. "Yeah, I'm the caller. I've been listening since the very beginning," he said. I was getting really tired of this guy, but he continued. "Ben, do you know just how many serial killers bury their victims in the desert? I've seen them, you know. They're gorgeous. You want me to bring you some?" I was losing my patience. "All right, listen, man, that's really sick." "Okay, I'm hanging up on you now, but you need to get checked in or something," I said. I slammed the phone down, much harder than I meant to. The wind outside picked up. I could hear the windows rattling as sand pounded against them, but before I could take a breath, the phone started ringing again. My patience was wearing thin, so I disconnected the phone from the console. I didn't want this guy on air if he called again. I knew I was supposed to answer every call, but from then on, I told myself I'd screen them before going live. Sorry about that, folks. Some interesting characters out there. How about some stuff from the good old days, I said. No matter how weird things got, I still needed to do my job. I queued up a bunch of different songs, anything for some peace, and the whole time the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Once I made sure the lineup was going to last me a while, I picked up the phone again. "What do you want?" I asked. The voice that came through wasn't just angry. It was downright pissed. "You listen here, kid. You do not hang up on me. You're here for my entertainment. You went to a fancy college to be a performing monkey, didn't you? So start dancing." Hearing those words, something inside me snapped. I was angry, but more than that, I was fed up with this guy. I wasn't someone's toy. No one had the right to treat me like this. "Okay, I don't know who you think you are, dude, but you can't talk to me like that. This is my show, okay? And I'm not here to play games or be pushed around by." I was cut off by 2 loud knocks. They were coming from the other side of the booth door, but the station was supposed to be empty. I didn't hear anyone drive up. Then the caller started laughing. "You got no choice here, Ben," he said, and then hung up. Another pair of knocks echoed through the booth, louder this time. I slowly put the phone down, my mind racing. I looked at my phone and I realized I had no reception. Just perfect. Alone in the middle of nowhere with a psycho. Desperate for some kind of protection, I found a metal baseball bat hiding under the booth. It was dented and covered in grime, but I didn't want to think about why that was. 2 knocks sounded again. This time they came from high up the door. It sounded like it was coming from the ceiling. I stood up from the booth and I gripped the baseball bat with both hands. Whoever the hell was on the other side, I was ready for it. I yanked the door open, ready to strike, but there was nothing. Just the empty, silent station. The music from the radio booth drifted out to fill the empty space. I still had 20 minutes worth of songs left before I'd hit dead air, so I decided to use the time to investigate. The bat felt heavy, but reassuring in my hand as I checked each room. The office was empty. Papers littered the desk, and the ancient coffee machine sat silently in the corner. Nothing out of place. My next stop was the bathroom. The door creaked as I pushed it open, but again, I didn't find anyone there. Just a dingy toilet and a sink. I could barely fit in there myself. I was about to shut the door when I saw something flash from the toilet. There was something sitting on top of the tank. I moved closer, wondering what it was. And you're not going to believe this, but in the dim light I saw a small pile of human fingers. A silver ring glinted from one of them. Then I heard someone laugh. I spun around, bat raised. There was no one else in the bathroom. I saw something on the wall, a pair of peepholes, and behind them were two bloodshot eyes staring at me. The caller's voice echoed in the bathroom, bouncing off the tiles. Nice, isn't it? I panicked. I bolted back to the DJ booth, and I locked the door behind me. I sat at my desk and checked my phone again. Still no signal, but I did see that it was 5 minutes to midnight. I remembered the rule about playing a specific song at this time, so I found one labeled Midnight Record without thinking. I queued it up and hit play. The song that came through the speakers was different, to say the least. A combination of drums and a high-pitched noise that sounded like a drill. It was so loud it hurt. I tried to cover my ears, but it barely muffled anything in the background. I heard screaming, and then the knocking started again. 2 loud bangs on the window. I turned and expected to see a person, but no, it was a goat staring at me. A big black and white one. One of its horns was missing. Behind the goat, I could see the wind had picked up. Desert sand swirled around outside in a storm. Over the speakers, the midnight track kept playing. My head started hurting from all that noise. The goat bleated, and somehow I heard it through the glass and over the music. It bleated again, and then I swear it smiled at me. It showed teeth that looked too big and too human. Its lips stretched wide, in a way I didn't know was possible. And then the goat stood up. It raised one of its front legs, and at the end of its leg was a human fist. Its dark fur ended just below the palm, nails broken and filthy. It knocked twice before pressing its hand against the glass, leaving bloody prints. It smiled at me again, before raising its other foreleg. This one ended in a hand too, and it was holding something. It took me a second to realize that it was holding a bloody human pelvis. Knock knock. It banged the pelvis against the glass twice. Over the speakers, I could hear the midnight record winding down. So I grabbed the mic and I tried to keep my voice steady. If anyone's listening, I need help. This is Ben. My name is Ben from Radio Harmony. I'm in the middle of the California desert and there's someone or something outside the station. Please send help, I said into the mic. I looked out the window again, and I expected to see that messed up goat staring back at me. But it was gone, as if it had never been there. Instead, all I saw was sand. The wind had kicked up a massive sandstorm. It made it impossible to see anything through the glass. Then the phone rang. It echoed out over the speakers, and it cut through the silence of the station. I glanced at the phone. I know I disconnected it from the speakers earlier. The free cord was lying right there in front of me, but it still rang. I hesitated, and the call went through without me even touching it. The caller's voice boomed through the speakers. "Don't forget the rules, Ben," he said, as if we were just chatting about the weather. "What do you want from me?" I shot back. "Entertainment. Play by my rules, and you may last longer than the others," he said before hanging up. I needed to do something. The sandstorm was still raging outside. I couldn't leave. Plus, I didn't want to know what that goat thing would do to me if I stepped outside. After queuing up enough songs to cover me for the next 30 minutes, I decided to take a closer look around the station. The first stop was the office again. Dust covered everything. It was like no one had done any cleaning in decades. I started going through the papers scattered across the desk. Even those looked old. Some of them were yellow around the edges and fell apart when I touched them. Eventually, I found a record of past DJs who'd worked at the station, a long list of names with dates next to each one. The list went all the way back to the 70s. But what really caught my eye was how no one lasted very long. The longest anyone ever stayed was 5 months. The most recent one ended his term. The same day I called about the job. I dug deeper into the filing cabinet. I uncovered more about Radio Harmony's past. Inside a folder were some old photos of the station. One of them stood out to me. It showed a group of people in front of the towering radio antenna. They were dressed in white flowy outfits that screamed hippies to me. The women had flowers in their hair. In their hands, they held up a banner that read, Children of Harmony. In the same folder were the old programming schedules. To my surprise, they were filled with religious content. It looked like Radio Harmony used to be an evangelical station. There were sermon schedules and worship hours. There were even specific times dedicated to prayer. But what really caught my attention was this one programming block. They named it The Great Calling, and it ran exactly during my shift from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Soon I found more photos. Most of them looked normal. Stuff like the tower being built, two of the hippies in the DJ booth, that sort of thing. And then I saw one that was a group of people dancing in a wide circle. The desert around them was a blur of sand. They were out in the middle of a sandstorm. They didn't seem to notice the storm at all. It was like they were in a trance. The next photo was of two men with their backs to the camera feeding goats. One of the goats had a horn missing. Then there was a photo of two women. They were sitting high up on the metal beams of the radio tower. The desert spread out far below them. They were both smiling. One of them looked like they were about to laugh, but their hands were tied to the bars with white ribbons and flowers. What the hell were they trying to do? What was this station really for? But I couldn't stay long and find out more. I knew my track list was about to run out, so I went back to the booth through the window. The sandstorm was raging like nothing I'd ever seen. The wind blew hard enough that it shook the walls of the station. Sand blasted against the glass. With not much else to do, I queued up more music. The last thing I needed was dead air, especially now. But just as the next song started, I heard it. Two distinct knocks on the station door, and then a voice came from outside. "Hello there. Heard your messages over the radio. Are you all right?" The voice said. It sounded friendly. Relief washed over me at the sound of another person. Yes, I'm here. You don't know how glad I am you've come. Everything. It's been crazy." I called back, moving closer to the door. But then the voice changed. I don't know why you want to leave, son. The Children of Harmony. They're good people. Foolish, but nice. All they wanted was to communicate with what's out there. He knocked twice on the door again. That's when I remembered there was a rule about not opening the door for anyone who knocked twice. And the voice was the caller. You want to know how the voice started? The Children of Harmony. They put up that tower to talk to God, but instead they got me, and now I'm trapped here in the station with nothing to do. He knocked on the door again, two at a time. There's a whole lot of bones buried out in the desert band. Pretty soon I'm gonna add yours. He said he started banging harder at the door, but still in that repeating 1-2 pattern in the background, I could hear the sound of goats. In a panic, I grabbed the mic I needed to call out for help, but the voice outside just laughed. "It's no use, you idiot. The radio tower's been busted for ages. You've been off air this whole time. I have collected a lot of DJs over the years, and now I want another." I looked out the window and saw those goats. There were more of them now, all smiling at me. They crowded around each other, their bloody hands pressed against the glass. Like hungry children looking into a candy store, one of them brought up a half-eaten foot and started chewing on it. Inside, the pop music blaring from the speakers cranked up louder on its own. It was so loud I could feel the beat sounding in my chest, and the whole time the caller kept banging on the door. I could hear the wood splintering now, and I knew it wouldn't last much longer. "Come on, Ben. Time to meet the kids," the caller said through the storm. The loud music, the banging, the goats. I couldn't think. I started flipping switches and disconnecting cables. Anything to make the music stop, but it didn't do anything. Pop ballads blared from the speakers. I reached for the main plug and electricity went up my arm. The goats laughed as I crumpled to the floor. God, even their laughter sounded human. A whole crowd of them cackled as the wind howled. As I fell, I knocked over a stack of papers. Under them were some old vinyl records. I sat up and I saw that they were gospel music. Wait a minute. I looked around and I saw an old record player sitting in a corner. It was worth a shot. I put one of the records on, the needle dropped, and powerful organ music filled the station. I felt the bass vibrate in my chest. It was beautiful. Then the lyrics kicked in a low, soulful verse about protection and deliverance from evil. The knocking stopped. The loud pop music cut off. I looked out the window and I saw that the human go-things had disappeared. It was just me and the gospel music. It continued to play, filling up the empty station. Even the sandstorm looked like it was easing up. I sat back in my chair and I let out a long sigh of relief. I let the record play. As it was winding down, I heard the wind pick up again, and I quickly switched to another record. The desert calmed back down as soon as the first worship song started. For the rest of the night, the phone stayed silent. No more calls, no more banging. There were no more goats either, thank God. Just peace. Eventually, I could see the sun start to rise. I looked at my watch. It's nearly 6 a.m., almost the end of my shift. And that was when I remembered the last rule. Play the goodbye song. I started cleaning up, reconnecting wires, and turning the laptop on again. I found the track named a goodbye song, and I queued it up to play right at 6 a.m. The track was odd. It was just static, with a voice repeating "come out" over and over again. As soon as I finished, I walked right out the door. The desert was calm, and the morning sky was clear. And that was when I found a white envelope lying on the ground. My name was scrawled on the front, in the same handwriting as whoever wrote those rules. I picked it up and was surprised at the weight of it. Inside, I found a huge stack of bills. It was more money than I'd ever held in my life, enough to last me rent for months. Along with the cash was a note signed by the caller. I've been retired for almost 8 years now. 8 whole years. My, how the time does fly. I have to say, I got mixed feelings about retirement. On one hand, I appreciate having more time to spend with my wife and our grandkids. I spent most of my life saving up a nice little nest egg, and now I can finally enjoy it. My wife and I have been taking some of those vacations we always talked about taking. I've had a chance to see more of the world and enjoy my life on my own terms. On the other hand, I find that I get bored quite easily. I've always had a mind for puzzles. I like the challenge of them. Back when I was working as a fisherman, they kept me occupied while I was out at sea. Then when I got too old to be at sea, I thought I might as well put my brain to some use and started working for the government. Inspecting ships to make sure they were up to snuff, and eventually investigating marine accidents. Macabre as it may sound, I enjoy dealing with the marine accidents the most. I just found them so interesting. If a boat didn't dock correctly, or if it ran aground, I was the man they called in. My job was to determine exactly what happened, why it happened, and what could have been done to prevent it. Then, of course, we'd write up our report. Granted, the whole process was far more complicated than that. I could spend hours and hours going into the details, but I'll stop myself there lest I get too far off topic. Most of the accidents I investigated were fairly open and shut. Human or mechanical error was generally the cause. Sometimes I'd come across an accident where loss of life had occurred, or where a ship had gone down. But those typically weren't that difficult to figure out either. People are stupid, and the sooner one accepts that, the sooner one will make peace with the world around them. In each case, I do my investigation, report my findings, and leave it to the proper authorities to handle the rest. It was an interesting career, and I enjoyed it immensely. I spent about 15 years investigating these accidents, and as fascinating as many of them were, none of them have stuck with me, quite like the last one I ever worked on. The only one we never actually solved. See, with every other accident I've investigated, there is always a clear-cut explanation. Someone made a mistake. Someone was being an idiot. A piece of machinery was not properly maintained. There was always a cause that could be determined, but the sinking of the Walter was different. I've gone through the details over and over again in my mind, and I've yet to find an explanation to any of it that I consider satisfactory. For 8 years now, it's vexed me. My wife has told me time and time again to let it go. But, well, that's far easier said than done. She doesn't know what I know. I've never shared the details with her. Technically, I shouldn't be sharing the details now, but a few glasses of whiskey on this nostalgic night have loosened my lips a little. Yes, yes, I know the saying. Loose lips sink ships. But the ship has already sunk, hasn't it? What harm is there in putting it out there? All these years later, maybe someone else will see something I've missed. Maybe the obvious answer has been staring me in the face this whole time. Maybe. The Walter was a reefer ship sailing in from South Africa. For those who don't know what a reefer ship is, it's more or less just a refrigerated cargo ship. Reefer being shorthand for refrigerated, you damn hippies. They use them to transport perishables that require a temperature-controlled environment. Fruits, vegetables, meat, dairy, and the like. On February 7, 2015, the Walter was scheduled to make port in Montreal, only it never actually arrived. There had been some concern already. Since the last communication from the ship had come roughly 3 days before, the Walter was also known to be a fairly old ship. They'd had technical issues in the past, and on top of that, the entire area had been ravaged by a fairly nasty snowstorm that day. The ships that did come in came in with layers of ice crusted onto their hulls, while Walter's delay was concerning. It was still considered likely that the boat had simply been delayed by the storm and that their radio silence was on account of some kind of technical issue. However, when the Walters still hadn't arrived by February 8th, people started getting worried. A team had been dispatched to look for the ship, moving down St. Lawrence River for either a sign that the ship was en route or that it was in trouble. They found nothing. No sign of Walter. No sign of an accident. Nothing at all. In fact, as far as the team could tell, Walter hadn't even made it to the St. Lawrence Seaway. So the search was expanded. They started searching the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and there at last, they found it. Or I suppose it might be more accurate to say what was left of it. I can still clearly recall the photos that were sent to me of the wreckage. I remember staring at them, trying to figure out just what exactly it was I was looking at. The pictures showed something that somewhat resembled a large iceberg. It wasn't until I looked closer that I even saw the ship. Only part of the bow and the upper deck were exposed. The rest was almost completely buried in the ice. In all my years, I'd never once seen anything like it. According to the report I got, a rescue team had been called in. Although honestly, I don't think they were expecting to actually find anyone still alive on board, even from the air. It was clear that the ship was devoid of life. They found a few bodies on the top deck, although they'd been picked at by the birds to the point that it wasn't immediately clear. As to what had killed them, the cargo hold looked to have been severely damaged by some kind of explosion, and most, if not all of the cargo had been completely incinerated. Although exactly what had been used to incinerate the cargo was unclear. Our best guess was thermite or white phosphorus, but even that didn't exactly match the profile. There was no residue left behind, none we could identify at least. Going below deck, the rescue team found more bodies. Those ones were more intact, and a couple of them were even armed. The team theorized that there had been some sort of skirmish and that the crew had been trying to defend themselves from something, although exactly who they'd been trying to defend themselves from was unclear. Whoever the attackers had been, they didn't seem to have suffered any casualties. And everybody on that ship would later be positively ID'd as a member of the crew. The bodies had all suffered severe burns, which were later determined to have been the most likely cause of death, although just what kind of weapon could have killed them was never identified. Simply put, the ship was a damn graveyard, and almost nobody knew why. Almost nobody. There'd been one survivor, a man by the name of Nathan Cameron. They'd found Cameron in the ship's galley, of all places. The door had been closed and locked, and a fairly thick sheet of ice had grown over it. From what I heard, the ice was thick enough that the rescue team might not have even bothered trying to get through it if they hadn't heard movement behind it, and wondered if somebody might somehow still be alive back there. They'd spent almost an hour chipping away at the ice before they finally got that door open, and the poor bastard who'd opened the door was rewarded with a knife through his shoulder. Cameron had come out wide-eyed, hysterical, and fighting like a cornered animal. It had taken 3 men just to restrain him before he finally seemed to realize that this was a rescue team after that. He'd just gone completely limp, not necessarily calming down, but not fighting anymore. They'd taken him off the boat and back to shore, let him sleep in a real bed, and waited to see what he'd say when he started talking. Only Cameron didn't talk. Not at first, anyway. I was brought in to speak to Nathan Cameron around early March of 2015. It was roughly a couple of weeks after they discovered the wreckage of the Walter and managed to haul it to the nearest port to examine it. Due to the state that Cameron was in, my team and I had opted to investigate the ship itself first, which was no easy task. The ice proved to be the biggest obstacle in our way. It wasn't just outside of the ship. Several of the lower levels were completely blocked off by it too. Given the volume of ice we were dealing with, we figured that sometime before the freezing had occurred, there had been a breach in the hull. The levels we couldn't access had probably been completely flooded before the freeze. There was too much of it to chip away, and the weather was too cold for it to melt, so we needed to get creative. We had to bring in a whole other team to use some sort of ground-penetrating sonar to figure out where the breach might be, and from there they needed to use mining equipment to break away chunks of ice so we could get a good look at the damage to the hull. The process itself took over a week, and I can't say that what we found helped clear anything up. Our initial theory was that the breach might have been caused by a collision with an iceberg or some rocks, but what we found in the hull of that ship wasn't consistent with that kind of damage. As far as we could tell, something had melted clean through the hull of the Walter, and whatever had done it had left a hole big enough for a grown man to stand upright in. Although just what could have done that was beyond any of us. Our leading theory was that whatever had been used to burn the cargo had also been used to burn through the hull. Although that still didn't leave us with a lot of answers. Nobody on our team knew what the hell could have possibly done this, never mind who or why. So with no answers to be found on Walter, we turned to Cameron next. When I was flown to our office in Quebec to speak with Cameron about what exactly happened to Walter, he still hadn't officially said anything on the record. I was told that he'd started speaking again, though, which was considered to be a good sign. The man I met in our office bore little resemblance to the wild-eyed feral thing the rescue team had recovered from the ship. The Cameron that I met was a man in his late 40s to early 50s. He was bald and had a stern face with narrow eyes. He had a tattoo of an anchor on one arm and a nautical star on his wrist. I imagine he had other tattoos elsewhere, although I never saw those. He carried himself with a certain tension, like a rubber band ready to snap. When I first entered the conference room to speak with him, he watched me intensely, as if he were waiting for me to make a move that he didn't like. I must admit, the way he watched me made me a little bit uncomfortable, but I couldn't really blame him for his demeanor. After what he'd been through, I'd probably be tense too. "Nathan, it's nice to finally meet you," I said to him as I sat down. He didn't respond to me at first. He just fixed me in an intense stare, still sizing me up. "My name's Thomas. How are you feeling today?" "I'm fine," he said quietly. It was a simple statement, but it was at least a statement. A sign that he was willing to talk. "I'm glad to hear that. You settled in all right? Have you had a chance to talk to your family?" "They're in town," he replied. "My wife's waiting for me back at the hotel." Good after what you've been through. It's important to have a support network." "I'm glad we got her out here for you." No response that time. Cameron just kept staring at me. "So, Nathan, let's talk about what happened on the water," I said. "Can you tell me what you remember?" More silence. Only now he wasn't looking at me. His breathing had changed a little bit, growing heavier and more labored. He closed his eyes for a moment and then opened them. I gave him a few moments to compose himself. "Nathan, if you don't want to talk about this today, I can come back later when you're ready," I said. "I just want to understand what happened out there." "You saw the ship, didn't you?" He finally said. "That didn't tell you enough." "It had told us a lot," "Yes," I said, "but we still have a lot of unanswered questions. I was hoping that you could fill in the gaps for us." Another pause. Nathan was back to looking at me now, although after a few moments, his expression softened a little. "Where do you want me to start?" he asked. "Let's start with what you remember. Walk me through the series of events as you recall them." Cameron gave a slow nod and fell silent again, choosing his words carefully before he spoke. "I suppose I'd best start with what we saw in the Atlantic then," he said. "It was about 8 days after we'd left Durban. Or I guess you could say we first noticed it 8 days after we left Durban. I didn't see it at first, but I heard some of the others talking about it, seeing something out on the water at night, seeing something. I asked. Lights in the sky, he began. Not stars, something else. We thought it was just some planes flying past at first, but the more we saw him, the more we started to think there was something else going on. Like I said, I didn't see him at first. I just heard others talking about him. But you did see them, right? I asked. Cameron nodded. Just once. I'd been out for a late night smoke when I saw him off the port side at a glance. Just looked like a plane, although it was flying a little too low and moving a little too fast. I'd watched it for a while before it disappeared behind some clouds, to be honest. I hadn't thought that much of it at the time. I found it a little odd, sure, but I figured it had to have just been a plane. You just said it couldn't have been a plane, I said. I said it was flying too fast and too low. It was odd, but I didn't think there were a lot of other things that could have been. You see something flying in the sky. Your immediate thought is that it's a plane, right? Yeah, this one was weird, but I didn't think there was anything else it realistically could have been. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to suggest you were contradicting yourself, I said. Please, let's continue. Cameron leaned back in his chair a little. Right. He said, like I said, I didn't think too much of it, but I knew some of the other guys on board found the whole thing creepy. They thought we were being followed and were trying to figure out who it was. There was even a rumor going around that we had some unusual cargo on board and that someone was sending some sort of spy plane to keep an eye on us. Personally, I found that whole idea to be kind of stupid. So what did you think was happening? I asked. Overactive imaginations, Cameron replied. People saw some weird planes and immediately made up some stories to try and explain it. Then they noticed some weird boxes in the cargo hold and started looking for connections. Weird boxes in the cargo hold? I asked. Yeah, samples from some sort of lab, I think. I was there when we loaded them on. We were told to handle them very carefully. I don't know what was in them. I assume the captain did. Either way, we kept them separate from the food we were carrying to prevent any sort of cross-contamination. We get things like that all the time, specialty items. Right? I said before moving on. So these concerns among the crew, you personally didn't put a lot of stock in them, correct? Not until I had a reason to, Cameron replied. Up until around February 5th, I think we were on schedule. Everything was going the way it was supposed to. He paused, going quiet for a moment. Can you tell me about what happened on February 5th? I asked. He remained silent, closing his eyes again to compose himself. I let him take his time. We got hit by a storm, he said. We knew it was coming. We just didn't realize it was going to hit us that hard. I remember that while we were preparing, we saw the lights in the sky again. Only this time they were off in the distance, nowhere near us. Few of the guys were still worried about him, but the rest of us just wanted to batten down the hatches, get below deck before the storm hit. Another pause. Cameron seemed lost in his own memories. My team had finished our portion of the work, so we'd gone down to the mess hall for dinner. I never saw what happened topside. One minute we were sitting in the mess, shooting the shit, and the next the boat just shook. It felt kind of like something had just hit us. Well, naturally, we wanted to see what was going on. We heard over the PA that there'd been some kind of breach on the lower level. My team was sent down to help down there. We barely even made it out of the mess hall when the engine died. The whole ship just lurched. I almost fell flat on my face. I don't suppose you know what caused the engine failure, do you? I asked. Cameron just shook his head. Sorry, don't know anything about the breach either, other than there was one. Whatever hit us must have put one hell of a hole in our ship, though. The flooding was pretty bad by the time we made it down there. We were pulling men out and trying to seal off the flooded levels when the freeze hit us. The freeze? I asked. Cameron gave a single nod. I don't know how else to describe it. One minute, the water was flooding in. Next, it was ice. It just almost came out of nowhere. God, some of the guys who were in the flooded hallways were knee-deep in the water when it just froze around them. They started fighting to get out. A couple of them did. The rest were stuck. Zach, the officer in charge at the time, sent me to go and get some more help. He sent someone else to the bridge to radio in for help. But before either of us made it topside again, that's when everything went to hell. What happened next? I asked. Honestly, I don't know, Cameron replied. We heard the guy on the PA saying that we were being boarded, but the power went out before he could say much else at first. Figured it was just something to do with the storm or the damage. But as we headed up to the top deck, we started hearing sounds. People are screaming. Something that sounded sort of like gunfire. Then there was this smell. Cameron trailed off before sighing. He rubbed his face, slowly shaking his head. God, I don't know how to describe it. Burning, I guess. Your crewmates? I asked quietly. Cameron nodded. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I think so. What did you do? I asked. The guy I was with got brave, wanted to see what was going on firsthand. But by the time we smelled the burning, I already knew that going up there was suicide. I tried to warn him, but he didn't listen. He made a choice to go up there. I made a choice not to. Instead, I went to the galley. I grabbed the sharpest knife I could find, and I closed the door. I figured that in a best-case scenario, they wouldn't find me, and I could keep away from them. And in a worst-case one, maybe I could at least take one of them with me. I sat still, hanging on to Cameron's every word. His voice trembled as he spoke, and he still had a faraway look in his eyes, recounting every detail, as if he were reliving it again. After a while, the ship went quiet. The air around me was freezing, colder than it had ever been. I could hear movement on the deck above me, but I didn't hear any more fighting. Then I started hearing footsteps coming down the hall outside. I could hear them opening doors, looking for survivors, I think. They must have found some. I heard screams, something that sounded a lot like gunshots, although, well, I'm not exactly an expert on guns. But it didn't sound like any gun I'd ever heard. It made this sort of crackling, sizzling sound. And after it was fired, that burning smell just got stronger. Another pause. I could see him recalling the smell he described. Finally, they came to my door. I thought about trying to keep it closed, but I was afraid they could shoot me through the door. So I hid. The door opened. I held my knife in a white-knuckled grip, and I saw a figure coming in. It was too dark to make out clearly at first, but what was immediately clear to me was that the guy who just walked in wasn't very tall, about 5 feet, give or take. He seemed to be wearing some kind of environmental suit. The helmet was reflective. I could see my own face in it, but I don't think that whoever had come and saw me. Not at first, anyway. They were holding some kind of gun in their hand. Don't ask me about the design of it. I never got a good look at it. Honestly, the thing I remember the most is hearing the sound of the blood rushing through my head. The figure in the room was about to look over at me, and that's when I lunged. I grabbed him by the arm that was holding the gun, and I pulled him toward me. I heard the gun go off. It made the same sizzling noise I'd heard earlier, and I could feel this heat on my left side, but I never saw any sort of muzzle flash. There were some dish towels on the counter beside me that caught fire, and they were just about the only light through which I could see what I was doing. The guy I had was struggling pretty hard. He wasn't strong, but he was fighting. So I took the knife and I stabbed him in his chest. He didn't scream. He was just silent. He was still fighting and trying to get away from me, and I was trying to keep a hold on him. I ended up ripping the knife out of him, and he tried to make a run for it. He almost slipped away from me, but I grabbed him, dragged him back in. His head slammed against the counter, and his helmet broke open. That was when he turned to look at me, and that was when I saw his face. What did he look like? I asked. Like something out of a damn sci-fi movie, Cameron replied. He had these eyes, big, black, and shiny, and that was just about all he had. Not much of a nose, a small mouth. The eyes took up most of his face, and there was just no expression in them. Nothing I could recognize, at least. He stared at me, and I didn't know what he could have been thinking. If there were any thoughts behind those eyes, they were all alien to me. I could hear others just outside the door, probably coming to investigate the noise. I ripped the knife out of the creature again, and I drove it into one of those empty black eyes. Its struggle stopped, save for a few twitches. You killed him? I asked. Cameron said. Not him. And yeah, I killed it. I honestly wasn't even sure if it could die. The gun fell out of its hand, and I grabbed it off the floor. Around the same time I did, I saw these two other figures in the hall, wearing the same type of environmental suit. I saw one of them raise their gun at me, so I took the gun that I had. I pulled the trigger, and I just started shooting. Just like before. It didn't really seem to fire anything. There was no recoil. It didn't feel like anything came out of it. There was just this heat. He paused, struggling to think of a way to describe it. Have you ever been on one of those theme park rides with pyrotechnics? You know how you can feel the heat from them on your face? It was just like that. Just heat. Nothing else. It must have done something, though. The figure who'd been raising their gun at me, they started to burn. So did the figure beside him. They tried to get back, but I just kept shooting at him. I could smell them cooking in that hazard suit of theirs. They didn't put up much of a fight after that. They just sort of collapsed. I could hear even more coming to investigate, and for a moment I thought about taking the gun and trying to use it against them. You know? Did you? I asked. Cameron uttered a quiet, empty laugh. I figured I'd just get myself killed all the sooner if I tried, he admitted. I mean, whoever they were, they probably had a way to counter their own weapons, right? Even if they didn't, all they needed to do was point and shoot. So no, I didn't go all Rambo on them. I closed the door again, and I waited to see if they'd come for me a second time. Did they? No. But I heard him outside, probably trying to figure out just what to do to me. I just sort of held my ground. I put out the fire that had started earlier, and I waited. The whole time, I was waiting for him to come in and kill me. I could hear their footsteps out there. I figured they must have been doing something, but nothing ever happened. They didn't make a move, and neither did I. So this standoff? I asked. How did it end? They left. He replied plainly. After about, 15, 20 minutes. Something else made the ship rock. Some sort of explosion, I think. I was sure the entire damn ship was going down this time, but it didn't, and my friends outside didn't seem too worried about it. After a few moments, I heard their footsteps getting farther away, and then nothing at all. I went to the door to see if I could hear anything, but there was nothing out there. They weren't even gone 20 minutes when the body of the dead one started to burn. Burn? I asked. Yeah, the suit just started smoking, and I could see the body sort of burning inside. The whole thing kind of freaked me out, so I used the side door to make my way into the mess hall and get away from it. The body burned for about another 20 minutes or so, before the fire died down. Around the same time, the gun started doing the same thing. It got so hot I had to drop it, and sort of just burned itself away. Why? I asked. Hell if I know, Cameron said. Maybe some sort of protective measure. Whoever it was didn't want their tech falling into the wrong hands. Maybe the guys outside had hoped that the fire would kill me. Who knows? Either way, when I went to check on the body later, there wasn't much left. Just this scorch mark where it had been. Same for the gun. So there was nothing left behind it. I asked. Just the marks on the floor. After that, I waited a few hours before trying to get out of the mess hall, but the door wouldn't budge. Neither would the door to the galley. The rescue team told me they were both frozen shut. I'm not sure if that was an accident or somebody's way of keeping me from causing any more trouble. Either way, I guess I'm lucky I got stuck in the galley. The food there kept me alive for the next few days. The power never came back on, but they had some perishables I could eat. I see, I said quietly. When the rescue team found you, you attacked one of them with a knife, is that correct? I asked. I thought that those things had come back for me, he said. I panicked. As soon as I realized what I'd done, he trailed off. I was in that room for 3 days, freezing my ass off, trying to stay alive, waiting to die. I wasn't exactly myself when they found me. Of course not, I said. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to insinuate anything. It's just, I have to say your retelling of things sounds a little... Cameron's expression darkened. You don't believe me? He asked. I do believe you, I said. But like you said, when we recovered you, you weren't exactly in your right mind. I'm just suggesting that there may have been some details you're misremembering, the figures you saw. The way you described them, they didn't sound human. They weren't human, Cameron said, before leaning in closer to me. You've seen the boat, haven't you? Do you know anything that could have possibly done that? I saw the bodies on my way out, burned so bad that their own mothers couldn't recognize them. I saw what those guns of theirs could do. If you go down into the galley, you'll find the scorch marks on the floor. Go on. You can tell me I'm crazy if you wanna. But I know what I saw. Whatever came for us that day, it wasn't human. There was an intensity in his eyes that, I must admit, did unnerve me a little. These were the eyes of a man who truly believed what he'd seen, and I knew there wasn't a single doubt in his mind about it. In the days following my interview with Nathan Cameron, I returned to Walter for a follow-up investigation. I focused primarily on the galley and the mess hall where Cameron had been confined. Sure enough, I found the scorch marks he told me I'd find there, and I asked the lab to examine them, hoping that maybe they'd give us some clue about what exactly it was that someone had been so eager to burn away. Part of me had hoped that maybe they'd be the missing piece to all of us. Hell, maybe they were, but if the lab ever found anything, neither me nor my team ever heard about it. Not even a week after my interview, our team was pulled off the investigation. According to our bosses, it was being handed over to some other department, although they never specified who exactly it was being handed over to. The whole thing was fairly hush-hush. We were made to sign NDAs and told that if the subject of the Walter ever came up, we were to simply say that the ship had capsized. That was it. No less than a year after the ordeal with Walter, I retired, partially because I was old and I damn well earned it, and partially as a way to get Walter out of my head. It didn't work. I spent the past 8 years lying awake at night, going over the evidence in my head. I've replayed my interview with Nathan Cameron over and over again in my head. So many times that I'm quite sure I've written down every word exactly as it was said. I tried to piece this thing together in a way that makes sense, but nothing quite fits. The closest thing I've got to an answer is that this was some sort of espionage thing. I think it explains why the cargo was burned and why the investigation was taken off our hands. But that answer doesn't quite fit. I can't think of a weapon on Earth with the ability to burn a hole through the hull of a ship like that. Nor can I think of any possible way that someone could have so perfectly frozen the water around the ship. The weapons that were used to burn the cargo and slaughter the crew don't match the profile of any weapon I've ever heard of. And in 8 years of research, I've yet to find any type of weapon that could do something similar. There's nothing on Earth that could do the kind of damage we saw done on Walter. Which leads me to the thing that haunts me the most, the way that Cameron described the figure he'd encountered, the one he'd stabbed to death. He was convinced that it wasn't human, and the way he described it, I'm not so sure that he was wrong. Maybe I'm going crazy in my old age, but if there's nothing on Earth that could have carried out that attack on the water, then maybe whatever attacked that ship didn't come from Earth. Maybe I'm just going crazy in my old age. Maybe I'm grasping at straws here. Maybe I'm misremembering something, but it's the only conclusion I've reached that explains everything. And if it's true, what happens if they come back? Maybe I'm just crazy. God, I hope I'm just crazy.